just to give everybody an idea of, we're talking about Winnipeg, which is the largest city in Manitoba. So on your screen here, I've got an old world map of northwestern Canada. And you can see how small the province of Manitoba originally was. Now it's absorbed parts of what used to be Assiniboine and this sort of upper northern territory here. It was originally conceived not as a province, but as an quote-unquote Indian territory for the Métis. And this was going to be a Métis territory awarded to the Métis people, which are half First Nations and half French or Scottish European descent. Both qualify as Métis. But then initially the whole thing was scrapped and it was redrawn, and it was proposed as a province instead. So this is the area that we're kind of looking at here, Manitoba, and Winnipeg is right there, and it's geographically it's pretty much the middle of Canada.
Some monster lakes there too, eh?
Yeah, that's the other thing that we forget, is that Winnipeg's got a lot of lakes. I mean, just north and central Saskatchewan has a lot of lakes too, kind of like Minnesota. But Winnipeg has, I mean, they have the two big lakes, Lake Winnipeg and Lake Manitoba.
Yeah, Winnipegosis. Winnipegosis I'm seeing here too. I got a map open here as well.
Yeah, but Manitoba itself has tons of lakes, and of course access to James Bay and Hudson's Bay, which is why it became such a central part of Canada, was because of our narrative of fur trade and railroad and all that, right?
And I know there is an island on Lake Winnipeg, either an island or a peninsula, that has an old star fort.
I do have the star fort too, actually. There's a star fort right on the peninsula of the Hudson's Bay. I don't think it's as far south as James Bay. It's right around Churchill area.
Okay.
I've got it actually pinned in saved in my favorites.
Fort Churchill. Yeah.
It's where are we here? It's the Prince of Wales. It's the Prince of Wales Fort. Let me see here. Okay, so it's this right here.
Nice. Yep.
And that's right. You're right on this peninsula here that comes in, and it comes into Hudson's Bay.
Yeah. Okay.
Hudson's Bay here, because I mean, the Northwest Territories is just right up here. So it's quite far north. There's the border for Northwest Territories. So it's right here. There's Hudson's Bay, James Bay down here for people watching that aren't aware. But to O's point, look at all the lakes here everywhere.
Yeah.
And these lakes are so big, they do have tons of islands in them. And I wouldn't doubt that there's star forts on some of these islands, especially Lake Winnipeg. It's just so huge and plays such an important part of our, the official narrative of our history in Canada.
And it's interesting how you can see all the lakes just sweep up through there into the Arctic. If you zoom out,
it just kind of keeps sweeping up this way.
Right across into the Northwest Territories and northern Saskatchewan, right? You see all the.
Well, this is all tundra, right? So this freezes and thaws. So it's basically like peat moss floating on a muddy, semi-liquid, depending on the time of year, surface. I mean, this is moose country up in here.
Yeah, very muddy. Yeah.
And caribou, of course. Also known as reindeer. Yes, muskeg is what we call it in Canada. Yeah, muskeg.
Yeah. Interesting.
So you can see here geographically from east to west. This is why O and I kind of thought it would be a great topic to cover. It's, from St. John's, Newfoundland to Victoria, Vancouver Island in British Columbia, it's pretty much smack dab in the middle. I haven't measured it with any Google tools, but it's, just visually you can see Yeah, sure, it's close to the American border, but most of us live close to the American border.
And you also got a highway going directly south right through the States.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, it's the. I mean, that's
Right through there, like
like
it's
right
a hub.
here. Yeah, just bang through here. It's actually such a hub. They've put in a few secondary highways
Mm-hmm.
because it's just there's so much traveling north and south between basically Winnipeg and Fargo.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I've been to North Dakota a few times as well. Beautiful country down there. Very nice. Very similar, obviously, geographically to what's happening as you get moving out of the Great Plains and start moving into the sort of the Canadian Shield and some of the more heavily forested and wooded areas of the east.
Mm-hmm. Definitely a fur trade background going on with Winnipeg, right?
Absolutely a central hub for the both of the competing fur trading companies in Canada's early history. Back before we were even referred to as Canada, we were referred to as Rupert's Land. Canada really only referred to Upper and Lower Canada, and here, a few provinces, 5 provinces, and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
All of this here was known as Rupert's Land. It was owned by the Hudson's Bay Company at one point.
Which I'd like to mention, Hudson's Bay Company definitely a major player in the resetting of the narrative in our research.
Yes, most especially Canada.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, Basically, the Hudson's Bay Company had held a monopoly for over 100 years on the lease for cultivating all of the fur trade sort of west of the Great Lakes. And then eventually there was another competitor, which was another Canadian fur company. I think it was called the Canadian Fur Company or something like that.
Hmm.
And David Thompson worked for both. He's the guy that explored
Mm-hmm.
this
Right into
region.
BC. Yeah.
Yeah, this region here, basically the same as Lewis and Clark. He's Canada's version of Lewis and Clark.
Yeah,
In
we have
fact,
the Thompson Okanagan Valley running through southern BC where we are. Yeah.
yeah, well, we have a David Thompson County right
Uh-huh.
between Calgary and Airdrie here
Okay.
in southern Alberta.
Huh.
So yeah, a major player as well. And again, yeah, part of the whole narrative of the fur trade. But you can see how this would be a central hub. The fur trade itself could cultivate the resources from the west, from the wooded areas, and so on. And then
Mm-hmm.
it could be processed through the various Hudson's Bay trading outposts here and then brought into Winnipeg. And then from there, it could be sent out by boat and later by railroad or by horse and cart caravan to some of the eastern destinations. And then from there, our biggest at that time period, for most specifically beaver, the biggest trading partner was, of course, England, because all the hats made out of that beaver pelt, even those black hats you see at the Buckingham Palace Royal Guard wear, that's beaver pelt hats.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Later on, the railroad coming in here, and that's the expansion westward. That whole narrative that we share with the United States about the railroad opening the West and the Wild West and the shoot 'em ups and the gunfights and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But initially, fur trade. You're right, and lumber and fisheries.
First locomotive to Winnipeg, I'm reading here, 1877, was brought by a steamboat. Connected to St. Paul, Minnesota. Hmm.
That doesn't surprise me.
Hmm.
Minnesota, that St. Paul area too, is very important.
Yeah.
But Minnesota, again, because of access to the Great Lakes, and obviously Canada and the U.S. share the Great Lakes. I mean, some we quote unquote own, and some the U.S. own, but we share them.
Yeah.
And as we know, in the old world, these were used as highways. These weren't barriers.
Mm-hmm.
These were accessible highways, and they were used to great advantage. So once you connect the railroad in with some of the old steam ships and the steam paddle boats that would bring the goods across the Great Lakes, then reconnect the railroad over here. I mean, the shipping just became just like child's play, even though it was such a rough part of the world here. I mean, this is no picnic to get through this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm reading 1881 Canadian Pacific Railway connected with Eastern Canada. That was when the connection was made, and then that sparked a mass immigration, we are told. into
Yeah,
Winnipeg.
that's the last. There was the last spike at Craigielachi there in British Columbia, outside Revelstoke,
Mm,
where the eastern line met the western line, and it was
uh-huh.
finally completely joined from coast to coast.
Mm, interesting. That's not that long ago. 1881. Not that long ago.
That's right. The railroad made it to Calgary by 1886, 5 years later.
Hmm.
I mean, we had local railroads for Alberta, right? We had a bunch going between Calgary and Edmonton, and then Edmonton was connected to a few lines into BC and then out to Eastern Canada. But Calgary didn't get joined into the main national rail line until 1886, or Calgary, I should say, 1886.
You're looking at a population of about 8,000 in that year, 1881, for
In
Winnipeg.
in Winnipeg,
Hmm.
8,000.
About 8,000, and then within 30-year period to 1921, it jumps up to almost 200,000. So 30 years, almost 200,000 people growth.
Wow.
Yeah.
Even 8,000 is an impressive number. But again, geographically, Winnipeg not so far west and still fairly accessible. So
Hmm.
8,000 at that time is, I mean, that's way more than Calgary.
Hmm.
Calgary had 800 maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
So I imagine you have some beautiful photographs that you found of some old world stuff in Winnipeg.
Yeah. Would you like me to share?
Oh, please, please. I love the photos you find. Oh, you find some of
Okay.
the nicest stuff.
Yeah, I dug pretty deep, so let's
I
let's
found a
give it a
few,
whirl.
but mine are more railroad related. So we'll kind of save that maybe if we have time later on, because, it's those are few and far between for some reason, even though it's probably at the time the biggest industry for Canada was railroad related stuff. There's not a lot of photos of good quality.
Hmm. Okay. Can you see?
I can now because I clicked add to stream and it pops up.
Okay.
Oh yeah,
So yeah,
that's one of the ones I found. That's
yeah.
I love that one.
Isn't it
Wow.
beautiful?
Yeah.
That's the Fort Garry Hotel, I believe.
Yeah, and that's Broadway Avenue, with the where the tram ran down the middle and the tree-lined streets there. That's just gorgeous.
Looking very well developed and old, actually, too, to my eye.
Well, yeah, it looks to me that looks like it could be. Well, again, we say this all the time because it's just something that people that do our type of research notice. But I mean, this could be in Germany or
Hmm.
Austria or Poland or even somewhere in industrial revolution England, right?
Hmm.
Maybe somewhere in the Midlands in England somewhere. Just beautiful.
Yeah, and this Fort Garry, one of the string of hotels that we're told put up by the railways, right, along with all those other, the Chateau Frontenac and the McDonald Hotel in Edmonton and the
Yeah,
Empress in
absolutely.
Victoria, all part of that chain.
The Banff Springs Hotel,
Let's not forget that one. Yeah,
or Hotel Lake Louise too. But Banff Springs is like on another level.
it's
I don't.
ridiculous.
The narrative on that one, if you see it, it's just like, come on.
Yeah, it'll get
Maybe
its own video.
surpassed only by Frontenac with that crazy narrative too.
While Frontenac is making some serious headway as far as the absurdity of the narrative. It took less than 2 years to build in 1893. 18
Yeah, and
months, I think they give it.
it's basically built on top of a hill or a mountain right in the middle of Quebec City, a walled city, one of the oldest cities in North America.
Yeah,
Just, yeah, ridiculous.
they're
2
gonna have
years
to
to
go.
build that, eh?
18 months. Let's not even give it 2 years. 18 months.
Oh, man. It's probably the narrative for this hotel and this photo you're sharing right now that probably say it took longer to build that.
Sure. Yeah. Probably.
And it's a fifth the size. I
Yeah.
mean,
Not even.
it's still a beast and it's still gorgeous.
And then the interior finishes are jaw dropping in all of these locations too. So
That's the
yeah.
other thing to remember is all the wood carvings and all the metal and masonry work inside and the polished stone. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
these are luxury hotels.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, this isn't just ride up on your horse and tied up to the hitching post and go in and get yourself a plate of beans, and a shaving haircut for 2 bits and then stay in a hotel for a night. like a Clint Eastwood movie. I mean, this is a highfalutin place.
That's the Hollywood distortion.
Yeah,
That's what that is, right?
because this is
Yeah.
the real Wild West. This is Winnipeg in the 1890s.
Probably 1890s, maybe early 1900s, but not much further along than that, I would say.
I mean, this is right in line with the Cowboys and Indians narrative, and we're still setting up, Indigenous First Nations Indian reserves.
Mm-hmm.
We're still told that Indigenous populations are roaming the Great Plains, following the buffalo, right at the same time as we're seeing this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Something doesn't make sense. Something doesn't add up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here, let's keep going. Bank of Montreal. Yeah.
Yeah, with the massive pillars, because Cowboys need a bank like that.
Prominent rail car system intact here too, right?
Yeah. Well, really close to, because CP Rail, even though it stands for Canadian Pacific, they're headquartered out of Montreal, and I think always have been.
Mm-hmm.
And CN, Canadian National Railroad, is headquartered out of Toronto. So, I mean, those two cities to Winnipeg isn't that far, but still, the level of this being built out at this time period, they'd still have to get all that stuff there. So they'd have to build the railway infrastructure before they could even bring the locomotive steam engines into Winnipeg.
That's a lot of work.
They can't fly them in. They can't bring them in on horse and buggy. So they got to build a track. And as they're laying the track, they got to transport the trains and the rail cars. So this was no easy task.
Of course, you have looks like basement windows down here, some sort of openings along the side.
So big giant building like that, it's more than just 6 guys with shovels and hammers to whack that up in 2 years,
And as I look at these two, this part here, as I'm seeing more and more of these photos, I'm starting to think that alterations, they like to de-decorate or undecorate the tops of these old buildings. So
yeah,
there very well may have been a dome of some sort up here that's been taken off, and then the hip roof was thrown up.
yes, because we often see this Greco-Roman, what we're told is a Greco-Roman revival style, and 9.9 times out of 10, it's got a dome on top. You're right. Yeah, so some alteration going on there.
1890, this photograph from 1890. Remember, 1881 was when the railroad made that connection. So 9 years on from there.
Nice big wide streets, as if the town founding fathers were somehow clairvoyant enough to know that, well, we're going to have streetcars and horses and buggies and eventually automobiles down here. So we better make these streets wide now.
Yeah, right.
It seems so unnecessary, right? For this little, edge of the prairies town.
Yeah. Also, I suspect, and there's a few photos, it's hard to tell in this photo. I think we have some brick cobbled streets.
It looks to me like that's cobblestone.
It's hard to tell in this one. There's another one, and I'll point it out when it comes along. But that evidence has been sort of scrubbed away as far as I can see in my research. It's hard to, because that's also another indication of time and history that there's no allowance for in a place like Winnipeg, right?
Is being able to lay all the cobblestone or brick road.
Yeah, and then and just the weathering on those as well. The time that it would take for those all to get rounded over and weathered as they do.
Well, and I'm just going to off the cuff ask you right now, just so that we can prove a point to people here about constructing roads like this in Canada, is what's Winnipeg known for? Oh,
what's Winnipeg known for?
Yeah, in terms of weather.
Cold and windy. It's our windy city. It's our windy city.
And would I be exaggerating if I said it's not much of a stretch that they can experience up to 7 months of winter in Winnipeg?
Yeah, and I've never been there, but I know the reputation, and I've heard it can be fierce in the wintertime.
So Winnipeg. This is not, in San Francisco or San Diego or Florida or even, I don't know, Savannah, where it's fairly temperate year round and you can lay a street like this, 12 months a year. These guys are working 3 months maybe.
It's a good
This
point.
spring, it's going to be muddy as hell when all that snow melts, and you're going to have all the runoff. So they're going to have what, July, August, and maybe half of September to work on these roads, and then it's going to start getting cold and snowing again.
And that, of course, that narrative holds true for the building of these structures as well, and the excavations that were supposedly had to have taken place for, and then you have to drain out the water that gets in there and all that type of stuff, right? So much work goes into
Right, and one
places.
summer you might have enough time to dig your foundation
Mm-hmm.
and maybe pour the foundation, but then now it's too cold, so now you gotta leave the job site, and then you're right. In the spring it's all muddy. They got to pump the water out, dry off the job site so they could get back to working on it again. And they've only got maybe 3-4 months if they're lucky, and then they got to shut it down again.
Yeah, so timelines, right? Timelines.
Mm-hmm.
And that's our main problem. Some people ask us in this research, "Well, are you saying they weren't built?" Or we're just saying there's something wrong with the timeline. That's my main point with my research. I'm just trying to illustrate that fact.
The
Timeline we're given
yeah,
doesn't add up, right?
and the workforce. Like we were saying, okay, around this time, Winnipeg had about 8,000 people. But you got to say, okay, half of them were women, and then there was a bunch of children. And yeah, there was some child labor, but industrial revolution in some of the factories maybe. But I don't think there was a lot of 5-year-old boys and girls carrying 200-pound blocks up scaffoldings to build buildings like this in the 1880s. This was, primarily grown men that were working in these job sites. And so you had, a handful of skilled and unskilled workers. Everybody else is doing other stuff, farming, working for the railroad, dentists, lawyers.
The professional class. That's right.
So it's not like everybody dropped what they were doing to help build this place for 3 months in the summer and then went back to their regular careers.
Yes. So this photo may be giving us an indication of the street as well. Hard to tell again, but you see the tracks in there.
Yeah.
And that's not mud around those tracks. I think
No, it looks fairly maintained, which would lead to believe some kind of surface on it. Yeah, like cobblestone or brick.
Let's keep going. I got a lot of photos here, so Winnipeg's spectacular, really. I didn't think it until I looked into it, but there's so much to offer. So here's the auditorium. Yeah,
that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, right? We as Canadians are getting indoctrinated against certain regions of our own country that there's nothing to see in Winnipeg. It's too cold. And yeah, it is cold, but it's too cold. There's nothing to do. There's nothing interesting there. But look at some of these beauties.
Exactly. You see a dome there and a dome there. This is the legislature building. This is something special, really. But
absolutely.
Yeah, we'll keep going. There's so much to see here. This is the front of that auditorium. Here, a little closer up to give you a sense of the magnificence. Love the
metal
lights.
work and stonework.
Beautiful, isn't it?
Glass work, beautiful.
These are spectacular. I love the old lighting, light fixtures that we see in a lot of these old world places.
Yeah, just beautiful detail.
Yeah. Here's one of 2 YMCAs you'll see in this presentation. So it's the earlier YMCA.
That's quite a nice building.
It is, isn't it? Yeah, long gone. I'm pretty sure long gone. Again, the street similar, showing us very clean looking too. Like there's a cleanliness to all of this.
Obviously, much easier to keep litter and debris off of a finished road surface rather than if it was dirt. Because if it was dirt, what they would have to do is have those horse-drawn carts with the big water tanks that would spray water on the dirt roads, and they would do that in the summer to keep the dust down. So that collects garbage and stuff because you have puddles and mud and yuckiness, whereas these streets look very clean.
At this point, I think we might be paved.
Yeah, looks like it. Yeah.
This is a gentleman's club. It might be Elks. I can't remember.
Look at all the tech on this thing.
A little dome there and a dome there.
Jeez.
Beauty, right?
My goodness gracious.
Yeah.
She's a beauty there, eh?
Undeniable. Yeah.
Kind of life insurance building, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Always the high arched windows in these buildings. So old world architecture.
I love those buildings that have the entrance on the corner of the building as opposed to on the street
Face.
face. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what the idea behind that is, or what advantages or disadvantages. Does it allow you to have more store frontage and less doors to move in and out of by putting it on
Yes.
the corner like that? I don't know.
Well, maybe it gets into the energetics of the whole thing if we get into the old world, energy tech and all that kind of stuff. And
It could be, or just aesthetically, the energy is more pleasant, maybe, or something gives
was
off
it
better vibes or something, maybe
like a
to look
feng
at.
shui
Yeah,
kind of?
maybe or something. Because even me personally, I love buildings that have the door on the corner like that, and I
Yeah,
don't know why. I've always gotten a kick out of it. I always find them really visually
I
appealing.
I can relate to that. I hear what you're saying. Here again, this is the one I think I was thinking of, and probably indicating to us that we have a bit of a cobbled street going on here.
Yeah, those cartwheels look like they're on top, not sunken
They're-
into dirt.
that's right. They're sitting
Yeah.
on top. That's right. And this is pre-paved for sure. This is way back in the narrative.
Oh yeah, yeah. I don't see any jalopies. It's all just horse drawn at this point.
Yeah. This is an old postcard of all the things you can see in Winnipeg, and then some. This one, the old city hall, scrubbed. They scrubbed this one in the '60s. I have a bunch of these in this
They
lab.
knocked that down in the 60s. Of course, they knocked it down in the 60s. Jeez, it looks like something out of Russia.
Sure does, and you see comments about it, and it was falling apart. It had to go. That kind of crap.
I doubt it was falling apart. It's just they didn't know how to maintain it, is what it was.
No,
and they probably couldn't be bothered to maintain it. We got to get rid of this thing, because how do we explain this to, how did this get built on the back of fur trappers and cowboys?
Yeah.
How do we explain that to the people?
This one's a gaping hole in the narrative of this building right here, for sure. I think a gaping hole.
Even that one next to it is nice looking too, with the two tech towers sticking out of the roof there. Yeah,
this thing. One here.
Yeah,
and I don't know what it is.
Looks like a bank or something. Looks like there's a gazebo there too.
Yeah. And the memorial, some sort.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a bank. More street scenes. I love the old street scenes. They're really interesting.
Yeah, me too, because you catch the buildings, but you get to see some of the vehicles, and you get to see how the people were dressed.
Mm-hmm. Big hats. Yeah. The poles on everywhere. You see all the poles coming off. Yeah. No flags, just poles.
You know what happens when you put a flag on a pole that high up, right? The wind beats the hell out of it in about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That's why most buildings now, when you see the flagpoles on the ground, or it's sticking diagonally out of the building above the main entrance at a 45-degree angle, and it's maybe only 30 or 40 feet off the ground.
Yeah.
If it's way up like that, like in this rendering, I mean, that flag will be destroyed.
Yeah.
Too windy.
Yeah. Especially in Winnipeg.
Yeah, again, you're right. It's like our Chicago.
Here's that building we were just talking about from another angle. There, that's a nice look at it.
It's a beauty.
Oh, wow. And you know what? This is the only trace I found. I don't think I have this on its own.
I wonder what it was.
I do too. Yeah. Beautiful.
What's this one in the foreground? Armory? Train station?
A market.
Flea market.
Or some sort of market.
It looks like an old armory.
Yeah, no, we'll see. You'll see a few more of this as we proceed. Yeah, quite something, isn't it? See, this is what I love about the old world too. All the old world cities seem to have these gathering places, these markets, and you can just picture music being played and produce being sold, and it's
these open markets where you'd have your butcher, your fromagerie, where you get cheese. You'd have a bakery in there. Probably a couple of different bakeries to choose from, and places like that. There'd be a little tea room in there. You'd have your fishmonger. Yeah, and you could just go in there, and you're right, they'd have entertainment, and you could socialize, and you could pick up what you needed to pick up, and it came directly from, the local farms or the local ranches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
maybe some import items, like tea and coffee and all that imported too. Tea's huge in Canada, right?
Yeah, yeah, Earl Grey.
That's right.
Yeah. All right.
Of course.
Carnegie.
Of course. This bugger in his libraries, eh?
We have to thank him for all the books. We have to history.
Even up here in Canada, eh? Thanks a lot for all them books, bud.
Yeah. Thanks for educating the masses. We appreciate it.
Even us filthy scratching out a living Canadians up here in the frozen tundra. We got
He
to read
educated
too, you
us.
know.
It brought us into the 20th century.
Yeah.
All right. I can't. This one keeps coming up. You'll see it
It's
again too.
gorgeous.
I think I have this in another format as well. This is a normal school, I believe. I can't see it there, but this is what they called a normal school. Again, that entrance on the corner, just like you
Yeah.
said.
And that term always, by the way, always kind of makes me laugh. Normal school.
Normalizing the people, right?
As opposed to abnormal school, like, you know.
Yeah, I think so. I think creating the norm. That's my take on that. Yeah, another street scene. I think
Lots going on there too. That's Portage Ave. That's their main drag.
Yeah.
Portage in Maine is their main intersection in Winnipeg. It's famous. It's on the Canadian version of Monopoly.
Yeah.
As being quite valuable. Not as valuable as Bloor Street on Canadian Monopoly. That's the big one.
Bloor Street?
Yeah.
Where's that?
In Toronto. That's the main financial
I should have known that. I didn't know that.
Like,
I know Queen Street, but
Bloor Street is like Canada's Wall Street.
I see. Old Eaton Centre. Old. It is quite old, actually. Massive building, though, especially for an early time period.
You know, I think I remember commenting on a video you put up not too long ago, because you were doing a city, and there was a number of things that came up about Timothy Eaton, and one of them was a Timothy Eaton Cathedral. And I thought, this guy ran a department store. How does he get a church named after him? And not even a church, it was a cathedral. I'm like, what the heck?
I didn't even put that together. That's the same Eaton, isn't it? I think that's from the Toronto video I did recently.
Yeah, I think it might have been.
Yeah.
Timothy Eaton.
So he's got his own church.
Yeah, apparently, unless it was the T. Eaton Cathedral.
Yeah.
So I mean, unless there's two important Timothy Eatons in the Canadian history.
I remember the comment. Yeah, but I didn't put it together that it was that Eaton from the Eaton Centres.
Yeah, because we had two big department store chains up here in Canada that are Canadian chains. The big one, of course, is the Hudson's Bay Company, the Bay, which is still functioning as a chain of big department stores all across Canada. But then the other one was Eaton's. Timothy Eaton and Company originally is what it was called.
Yeah. Eaton Centre. Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, the company that I used to work for, they are housed in the old Eaton department store building downtown Calgary.
I think we may have chatted about that earlier too in a previous chat about Calgary's Eaton Centre and how there's a bit of a inconsistency in the narrative there as well.
Yes, yeah, there is, especially with the Bay.
Yeah, that's the post office. So this one we were looking at here, it looks like that's the post office right here.
Yeah, with the bank on the corner like that, which
bank
is
here.
very common. Where they'll put a bank right next to a post office here. They do that all the time.
Yeah, so that's because that's this here, I think, from a
different angle. Yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful. Again, this is screams old world at me. This could be Prague. For all, easily.
It looks very aged in that. I mean, I know again that's a postcard, but it looks very aged even compared to the bank next to it.
There's a photo for you, and yes, it does look aged. Yeah, you're right. This looks a bit crisper in here, and columns up high again, and then of course you have this tech going on up here.
Yeah, and the fanciest stuff is always way up at the top where nobody can see it because it's 125 feet off the ground and everybody's 5'8".
Yeah,
you know.
Right there it is.
You got to be on the roof of the building across the street to admire the beautiful carvings and details on these buildings.
And then of course the streets get closed in and you can't really see that high anyway.
Yeah.
This might be that same Assiniboine block.
Yeah.
There's some interesting things like this, the old Fort Garry Gateway, old castle structure.
Yeah. You know, it's funny, when we were talking about the next live we were going to do, which was Winnipeg, and I started looking into some stuff, I was trying to find like strange stories about Winnipeg history. And all that kept coming up was ghost stories of various hauntings in various old hotels and stuff. But I was looking for this kind of thing, like just oddities and unusual little funny narrative things, and nothing really significant came up. But this is interesting. That old
Hmm.
Fort Garry.
Yeah, there's I think there's some sort of tourist thing you can do there still to this day, is from what I read.
I
I
think
thought this one
there's
was good.
putting out a fire in the winter.
Welcome to Canada.
Yeah.
Right?
Don't worry, we'll get the fire out, but then you'll freeze to death. So I mean, the choice is yours, buddy.
Yeah. Is this all brick here and rubble? Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
And then they got one ladder there to get the people out of the frozen, the frozen mess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jeez,
Yeah. Oh man. Another dome. Bank,
look
of
at that.
course. Nova
Yeah.
Scotia looks like Bank of Nova Scotia.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. So again, we have to go back to the timeline, the population, the. I mean, as we like to poke holes in the narrative, how are we allowing for all this stuff to go up in such a short period of time, according to the narrative, right?
And again, this is even by today's standards. Winnipeg is a very small Canadian city. So, I mean, that's a pretty hefty bank for even if we grant the fact that, okay, there's 8 to 10,000 people here in this, around the time of this postcard.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I grew up in a little town just outside of Calgary for a couple of years before moving into Calgary itself as a 19-year-old, and was like, I'm getting out of this little town. But that little town had about 10,000 people, and it only had 3 banks, and they were just like, in a one was in a mall, the other was in a plaza, and one was a freestanding building that was 1 floor. Nothing
But
like this.
no domes? No domes?
Nope, no domes. 10,000
Huh.
people, you might want to have at least 1 dome
Too bad for
and
you.
and 7 columns on the front. But no, they didn't bother doing that in Airdrie for some reason.
And an entrance on the corner again.
Yeah,
Interesting. Yeah.
just spared no expense for 10,000 people in the prairies.
It's amazing. It really is amazing. And even if we're putting this in the the first decade of the 20th century, how long has it been there for? This is not a fresh build. This is not. These aren't fresh buildings. They've been
No,
there a long time. Right?
no, the
So,
only fresh buildings that are going up at this point, by their own narrative, are houses, which are going to be wood frame, schools, a hospital,
yeah.
and maybe the odd post office.
Yeah.
That's about it, really.
So these.
Oh, and a Carnegie Library or 2.
Yeah, those go up no problem. That's
Yeah.
easy
Oh,
to
yeah.
do. Okay, well, let's see. Financial center. This looks, it's just a strange look, this clump of buildings here to me. Merchants Bank, Grain Exchange back here. You'll see that in another picture I have. Bank of Commerce, Bank of Hamilton. I never heard of that.
Neither have I, actually. It must be defunct now.
Yeah. Canada Customs House. You'll see this again. So another post office, really. Gingerbread style.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that style. It's very appealing.
Yeah, it is. It's nice. What is this one?
That
This must be
Merchants
a different
Bank's
runway.
nice, too.
Right?
You
The
get that
windows there.
triple arch. Yeah, you get the double arch with the portal above the arch.
So let's paint the picture here. You have these trains now ripping through, to get all these materials shipped, because I don't think they're producing all these materials in Winnipeg at that time.
The brick, I think, is being produced in Winnipeg. But a lot of the stone would have come from Ontario.
Yeah, I do see that Tyndall stone. Have you ever heard of Tyndall stone?
No,
I'm just looking at the legislative building was supposedly built mainly of Tyndall stone, but then you have glass, and you have so much of the interior materials, the hardwoods, and it's a monumental task to fit all this into the narrative that we're given. So timeline distortion, no question in my mind.
And don't forget, we have to keep reminding everybody that you have to reduce that timeline once again when you're talking Canadian cities in the winter.
Yes.
Much like northern American cities like New York and Chicago and Detroit and even St. Louis. They get some pretty tough winters too. Not to mention, some of the smaller northern cities, like places in like Kansas, they get
even
some harsh
Denver.
winters.
Yeah,
Denver,
the
yeah,
snowpack, Denver snowpack is heavier than the snowpack where I live here in northern British Columbia on an annual basis.
yeah, and you live right in the mountains.
I do. So I thought that was
You're like,
interesting.
I'm close to the mountains, but you're in the mountains.
Yeah, I'm up.
And
I'm tucked away. Yeah.
so that's saying something, that they get more snowpack than you do, and you're in the Canadian Rockies.
But to your point, like the allowance for time to build these has to be chopped in half.
At least, yeah.
At least, yeah. It's very unpleasant working in conditions, um, especially from heights. I can tell you from experience, like it's a whole different level of difficulty. The wind, the cold, the ice on the scaffolds,
Yeah.
things like this. Like,
And conversely, too, just to remind our viewers as well, is kind of Winnipeg's also famous for the opposite being true in the summer. It gets blisteringly hot. We showed you earlier in the stream all the lakes. It's humid as hell there. There's a joke that the mosquitoes are the size of dragonflies in Winnipeg.
I've heard that.
Which they are huge, and they're relentless in the summertime. Relentless. So we're talking now, it's, high 90s Fahrenheit, high 90s humidity, mosquitoes, dirt and dust everywhere, and you got to whack up this building in 3 months because the snows are coming.
And the boss is cracking the whip. Yeah, it doesn't add up. Here we go. HBC, Hudson's Bay Company.
Yep, there's the bay. Every decent sized town or city in Canada has or has had either a Hudson's Bay department store, a Hudson's Bay mail order where you can drop off your, you pick up your bay catalog and you pick the number of the item you want, and you fill out a slip and you drop it off at the little Hudson's Bay outlet. And then a couple of weeks later, you get a notification from the Canada Post to pick up your parcel at your local HBC outlet.
There's the grain exchange I mentioned earlier.
Yeah. Wow. So many windows on that thing.
7 stories.
You know how much time they would spend if they only put in half the windows that they did? How much time they would save?
Right.
Because again, by the narrative, we're told, like times were tough, limited resources, not only limited time and limited workforce, but just limited money to build something like this. So you'd think the builder would say, look, to save a few bucks, we're only going to put in half the windows that are in the blueprints or whatever, and we can save tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars by doing that. But no, we're going to cover it in all these beautiful windows. Then we're going to put all of these keystones and beautiful lintels above each window.
Yeah, and who's going to do the cornice, right? Who are the specialists that get to do all the detailing up along the top here, right?
Just incredible.
And you can even though it's a postcard, you can still make it out.
Yeah,
right? You can just see the detail. Here these days, it's just a flat sheet of aluminum or vinyl or whatever it is. Just there's no decoration going on anything up here at modern day for time and money purposes, right?
Get it done. Exactly. But apparently back then, money was boundless, I guess.
Time wasn't, according to the narrative. Get it done, right? Here, watch this. Have you seen this one? These are the old law courts.
That's a court. Look at the turrets and the conical domes with the tech, a huge clock tower with well, I'm guessing there's going to be 4 clocks on it, one facing each direction.
Oh, you're probably right. Yeah.
Wow.
Makes sense. Yeah. Postcard from 1906. How old does this look in 1906? Is this a brand new build?
No, that looks like that's been there for a long time, even by 1906 standards.
Right. Wow. This is what an incredible structure.
It looks like a rural British country estate.
Yeah. You're right. Yeah, somewhere out in the countryside with gated, you can't get anywhere near.
Yeah, like those old, rich British aristocrats from back in the 1700s would have some country manor, with, domes and spires and stuff. And that's what this looks like to me. Hunting
foxes with their hounds.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, all that stuff. Exactly.
Yeah. But and then, of course,
meanwhile, it's a court building in in Winnipeg. Amazing.
Let's look down here. We have basement windows, of course. So we have, obviously we're going deeper. They dug this out.
Yep.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So they slipped up on that one. That's a hole in the narrative, that one too, I think. Yeah.
I would agree.
Here's that gingerbread customs house post office we were talking about earlier.
It looks like a wedding cake, man. It's beautiful.
Isn't it? Unbelievable. Up here, look again at the decoration up in the cornice, and look at the arches up here.
I know they've inlaid the stone and alternated stone and brick just in those arches too. Just incredible. Holy.
Yeah, these people knew what they were doing when they built these. They weren't noobs. They weren't uneducated, like as far as not knowing what they're doing. These were skilled hands.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very skilled hands. Yeah. All right, keep going. Let me know if you want to jump in with your stuff. If you want to go through my file, I'm easy.
Oh yeah, no, I just keep rolling along with this. This is great. You always find great shots, and I like how you find actually really nice postcards too, because it speaks to. We see a lot of photos that have been vanilla skied, and they've scraped out all the surrounding buildings, and people, well, why did they do that? Well, this is why, so that they could reprint it as a postcard like this to attract business and tourism to the city of Winnipeg.
That's right. Yeah.
Through like the Chamber of Commerce or the local Business Merchants Association. And they would send these postcards out to business associates in other Canadian cities, and then people they wanted to do business with in the U.S., business partners in the U.S., in American cities.
Electric railway chambers? I don't even really know what that means. The electric rail system chambers, I guess?
Maybe the chamber of businesses that use the electric rail system, or
well, maybe
almost like a chamber of commerce, but for the rail transportation industry or something. It's kind of a weird name.
This is interesting. Whatever is going on down here too is funny shape.
Yeah, with a big arch in the front.
Yeah. All right, fire hall.
Oh yeah, of course, with the big, huge arches in the front, and then the tower, observation tower.
Easy to build. That must have been a quick and dirty build, as we say.
Yeah, just throw that up and put some horses in there for when the fire alarm goes, and they can just race out those big doors. Yeah, bang that up in a couple of months. Me and a couple of fellers.
Yeah, maybe on the weekend.
Yeah, get a bunch of good guys together. Hey, you're pretty good with wood and bricks, aren't you, Jim? Yeah, I reckon I am. All right, well let's whack this up then. In case there's a fire.
That's right. You got to get this thing established before all these places start burning down. And
before Winnipeg has its great Winnipeg fire, which I'm sure it had.
Yeah, I didn't see that in the narrative, but I didn't look for it either. So I think flooding has occurred.
Flooding's actually, now that you mention it, flooding's a big thing in that part of the country, in and around Winnipeg and south of Winnipeg and around Brandon and that sort of thing in southern Manitoba. Yeah, you're right.
It makes sense with all the lakes, doesn't it?
Yeah. That's true. It's there's a lot of flooding there. It happens a lot. It's some of our biggest disasters in Canada have been floods in that area. You're right.
Yeah. Well, okay. Why don't we start with a moment of silence now as we get into the churches? Just kidding.
Wow, look at this.
Okay, we're gonna roll through a whole bunch here. So the church narrative kind of gets me too, because we allow for the churches in our our consciousness. Even the people that do this research might think, okay, well, the churches, they were building these churches, these people worked for free,
members of the congregation would get together and they would actually build a church, and within the congregation there were builders and bricklayers and professionals and skilled and unskilled workers that were capable of doing this, and because they all belonged to the same congregation, they would all pitch in. It's kind of like the old Amish barn raising narrative. Similar sort of idea. Yeah.
So they were building this kind of stuff here.
Sure. Ranchers and farmers with that big giant organ in there. Brass pipe organ.
Yeah,
because that brass, you could just find that laying around in Winnipeg.
And of course, to get people to build them and tune them up there, it's an easy task.
How about those? Yeah, anybody could just assemble one of those old world organs, pipe organs, no problem.
Yeah. Then we have the Knox Church, which is something special. Something in the foreground here too, actually.
Yeah, it looks at the top of another church spire or something.
Yeah, maybe this is taken from on top of the neighboring church or something.
Could
I
be,
wonder.
yeah.
Yeah,
Or maybe that's
spectacular.
a memorial in that park or something.
Yeah, that's possible. Yeah, that's a good point. Good point.
You know, there's a Knox United Church here in Calgary, right downtown. It looks very similar to this one.
Yeah, I believe it.
This one's fancier though, and it's
Yeah.
got all the little bobule textile all over it.
Yeah, these little nodes on here.
Yes, all those nodes, exactly.
Something to that for sure, with the energetics and the
I think
harnessing of the
so.
energy, and yeah.
See a lot of that in the old European cathedrals, those
Yes,
nodes.
I'm thinking of places like Cologne and yeah, those big cathedrals over there. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, in Brussels and yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I can't actually. What does this say, Ralph?
I can't
Oh,
quite make it out.
Ralph Connor's church.
Oh, okay.
Let's see. Here's the brick on the streets.
That's definitely brick or cobblestone for sure.
Yeah. So there we have that confirmed. St. Boniface Cathedral. Oh my God. Are you familiar?
This.
Are you familiar with this structure or the story behind it?
I've heard of it, and I've seen some photos of it. There's something going on, most especially with St. Boniface.
I think it burnt down, I believe, in the 60s, we are told. I think the front face of it still stands. St. Boniface Cathedral in Winnipeg. Here we go. Yeah. Before the fire on July 22nd, 1968. So it burnt down in 68, we are told. Wow, look at it though. This is immense. This is immense. Look at these are all the little people, and let me get a visual of the. There it is. That's St. Boniface Cathedral.
Yeah, that's a beautiful church
in Winnipeg.
Yep. My goodness, look at that entrance with that big.
Here.
Yeah.
And this
big arch, and then that huge stained glass right in the middle.
It's absolutely absurd. Like, the narrative is completely finished in my mind at this point in time. After all I've seen, it's absolutely absurd to try to fit this into that narrow window of time. All of what we're seeing here, it's not possible. It's logically not possible in any way for this to have gone up within that time period, all of this.
Yeah, because then you look at, each tower's got a dome on the top, and then each corner's got another little dome. So you got, a central dome with one little one on each corner on both towers. But then on top of the dome, you have another little cupola with another little sort of stretched up little dome on top, because you got to have a dome on top of a dome.
They had to put it up there. They had to. It was in the building plans. They don't deviate from the building plans.
Yeah, because all of your, farmers and ranchers and simple folk in freezing cold Winnipeg, they expect domes upon domes.
Yeah.
Why expect anything less, right? I mean, yeah, we're all scratching out a hard living in existence here in the frozen north of Canada, but we still got to have domes on top of domes. Wow. I
can't get a solid build date, start or finish date for this thing, as I'm looking on the Wikipedia page here. 1906 looks to be a year that maybe it opened with this look here, but it's very, very gray as far as the timeline goes on this one. So, St. Boniface Cathedral.
Just the way it looks, it just as easily be 1806 or 1706, really.
Yeah,
just in exactly. The way, the style of it. I mean, they could give us any date and be like, yeah, okay, whatever, because it looks old world. Come on. Like, if I didn't know this was Winnipeg, and you said guess Frankie, I'd be like, man, I don't know, somewhere in England or France.
Yeah. 1906, the least plausible of those years that you threw out.
Yeah.
17 making more sense, right? Yeah. All right, let's look at a few more. What do we call it? St. George's English Church. Same style though, right? There's no shortage of these. St. Stephen's Presbyterian probably had towers that were knocked off, some sort of peaks going on. You see that?
Yeah, the Presbyterians and the Methodists tops were knocked off, and in my experience here in Calgary, and it seems like the Catholics and the Baptists were allowed to keep their pointy spires, and the rest the Methodists and the Protestants, the Anglican and United and them. Knock them off.
Yep. Interesting.
It's almost like some kind of organized religious pecking order. And the higher up you are in terms of in the controllers, then the more of the fancy spires and stuff you get to keep.
Also to mask uniformity, possibly, that these were all part of the same.
Yeah.
Same, right?
It served the same function. Like, oh, it's totally different, so it must have been a different denomination. When maybe at one point, you're right, they looked so much more similar to one another because they served a similar function.
That's probably, what is this one? No, St. Stephen's on Broadway. I thought it was the Knox for a second, but this is also another church in Winnipeg.
Again, with the little conical domes on the corners like that, looking like a castle.
So, I mean, again, like here again, the cones again, right? Holy Trinity, Anglican. Looking old though. Again, if this was in England, and this has a bit of an English feel, Anglican, I guess that's why, English feel. And I told you this was the 1600s.
But with the ivy and the moss, you're right, that looks...
Yeah, English, doesn't it?
It looks like English, small British hamlet, little old church. And, over there, if they said, oh, yeah, this was built in, like 1715 in some little English hamlet, Devington-Tynetonshire somewhere or something.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. And you're like, yeah, okay.
Yeah. All right. This is the Clements block of buildings. Apparently had dungeons below as a part of the narrative. Dungeons below them.
Why would these buildings have dungeons? What was their initial function that would justify dungeons? Was it like a courthouse or not? No.
Yeah, I don't know. Like it's so interesting, isn't it? Like,
dungeons in Winnipeg?
As part of I saw a comment thread of people who lived in the area whose grandpa told them the story. That was sort of how it went. That's where I pulled
there's
that from.
Dungeons done. It's probably some kind of narrative to cover up the fact that there's below ground level floors down there, and they're trying to explain it away. And they can't merely explain it as a basement because maybe there's more than one below ground floor. So they say, oh, there's a basement, and below the basement there's dungeons.
Well, that goes to the whole haunted house narrative. Like you were talking about that earlier. A lot of these places have a haunted story to go with them, and it's almost like a nothing to see here narrative. Be scared of what you see.
There's just some ghosts. It's fine.
Yeah.
And people are like, oh, okay, yeah.
Spooky. It's all spooky, and you don't want to dig too deep into that one. It's scary.
Yeah. And if you do dig too deep, oh, it's just a ghost story. Oh, okay. And a lot of people are more willing to accept some wacky ghost story.
Yeah. Than the truth or possible truth.
Yeah, than the potential that, there's 2 or 3 levels below this and it was mud flooded.
Yeah.
And it's an old world building.
1921 parade going on here. I just thought the street. See, look at this. This is a theater of some sort. It looks like gold.
Yeah.
Gold theater.
I was going to say Colum.
You're right. Yeah, Columbus.
Columbia, maybe.
Yeah. You're right. I think you're right.
Awfully fancy though. Look, holding up above the arched door, there's sort of an arch sign, and it looks like a cherub is holding the sign there. See? It's pretty fancy.
It's beautiful, right? It looks like a Union Jack up here. I wonder if they plopped these in there.
Yeah.
It's a sign that it's ours now. Yeah. But I always like the ritual too with the old. I find it interesting. You get it with the church, like the Vatican and the Crown. Love their ritual, and our history our recent history or our inherited history is steeped in ritual.
Yeah, right? That looks like Royal Canadian Army infantry. Like this is right around World War I-ish.
Yes,
possibly
just after 1921. Yeah.
Okay,
right.
so so the boys are home and we're having military parades and stuff. Okay.
The war to end all wars, right?
Right.
But
the war to start most of them, really.
Yeah, totally. Here's this one again. And then, I know, right? And then
just a courthouse. It's fine.
This one
for
again.
Criminals to stand trial.
Right. Yeah. What's this? Another parade, 1916.
Decoration Day. Okay, yeah, that's end of the war.
Again, the streets you see maybe paved at this point, but I don't know. I think there's probably a carryover from the cobble
Yeah,
of the paving going on.
yeah. At that time, I would say probably cobblestone or brick.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. So you get a lot of these too. This is an apartment complex, looks like.
Yeah, that looks like one here in Calgary called the Anderson. But it has a copper dome on the roof above the main entrance there, that recessed part.
Mm-hmm.
Ours has a copper dome roof with a big antenna tech thing on top.
Edmonton's got one almost identical to what you're describing as well. I can't remember what it was called. It's a French name, but very similar structure as well. Yeah. I think maybe we saw this bank. I'm not sure. There's
That's
so
the
many.
TD Bank, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Another big parade.
Everyone loves a parade. Oh, everybody loves a
1912.
parade.
Yeah, 1912. This is a little earlier, according to the date I have here. And then
Okay. What was
looking
going on
like
in 1912, I wonder?
that's a good question. Some
When
sort of
did
confederation, or
when did Manitoba become a province?
let me look here. I have the
It was right around 1908 to 1910, give or take, I thought.
maybe it was celebration of. I'm not seeing the date
Maybe it's
here.
100 year of the War of 1812, 100-year anniversary of the War of 1812, maybe, or something.
Possibly, yeah, possibly. Interesting. All right, depiction of a brewery.
Oh yeah, gotta have brewery.
Drury's Brewery.
Come on, yeah, sure.
That's what it's
Why
called. Yeah,
not? Why
they had
not call it breweries?
they had the
Jeez.
domes though, right? They had people who knew what they were doing.
Yeah, well, you gotta ferment some grains. So to do that, you need domes and spires and arched windows and 4 floors.
Yeah, horse-drawn
The
rail
grain
cars.
ferments better that way. You see, that's how you get that strong Canadian beer.
Mm-hmm. With that structure. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
yeah.
That makes sense.
If it looked more like the Budweiser Anheuser Busch Brewery in St. Louis or wherever that is, without domes,
Yeah,
see, the beer doesn't have as much alcohol content that way. You see.
it's our specialty. You just gave away the secret.
Sorry about that. That's a Canadian national secret of how
Yeah,
our beer is so strong. Your brewery's gotta have domes on the roof.
yeah,
Old world domes.
yeah.
Oh man.
So many of these I dug quite deep to find like these. It's just there's too many. The volume of the amount of buildings that were there. Okay, here's that market. Here's that market from the other angle.
Oh wow. So it has a nice tower on it too.
Isn't
Almost
it?
like an
Isn't it?
observation tower.
Right. It's a nice looking building.
Well, you
Really,
can
really
see why
nice.
on the one end with the huge arch on it, you can see why I thought it looked a bit like an armory,
Mm-hmm.
because it
Mm-hmm.
has that style where it's a huge arch and then the roof comes to a pointed peak above the arch right at the apex,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of a long narrow building. I mean, this has stuff added on and built onto it, jutting out
Mm-hmm.
the sides, but
Mm-hmm.
I mean, most armories kind of look like that. That's why that was my guess initially.
Yeah, this is from the other side of it, and it has one on the back too. There's that tower. We were just on
Yeah.
that back side of there, and see all the windows here for open air
Yep.
that open up.
Yeah, and you can put them on an angle like that. So depending, you can either draw air in or have the air sucked out,
Yeah.
depending on how you open and close those windows. It's
Mm-hmm.
part of the old air exchange system. That's why
Yeah.
I think some of those towers were used for, to draw in the initial fresh air, and then it
Mm.
was circulated throughout the building in cavities between the walls, and then vents that
Mm.
would vent inward, and then the change in pressure would force out the quote unquote stale air out of all the other little sort of cupolas you see with the louvered sort of covers over them.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Interesting point.
It's a
Never
theory.
thought of that. Yeah. No, it's good. Old City Hall. This is 1876. Come on.
1876, and it's already got bricked in windows.
Apparently.
So they built it, and then they decided too many windows. We'll block some of them in, which
Silly.
costs even more money because now you got to take out the glass and get more brick and hire a bricklayer to come in and brick all that up with brick and mortar.
Yeah, and that's a renovation.
Why? Yeah. Why not just leave the windows there? Like, what's?
Yeah, it's silly. Silly. Happy Land. Heard of this at all?
No, I haven't. Happy Land.
1906. Happy Land Amusement Park, 1906 to 1920. It ran for
Oh,
14
that's not
years.
very long.
Strange, right? And
Look at that
yeah,
onion dome on that building, kind of the reddish orange onion dome.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And there's some more spire type things going on back here. And
So is it
again,
like an amusement park?
yeah, had a roller coaster and all those things.
Huh.
Yeah, didn't last long though. Apparently, didn't last long.
Well, they should have made it a trolley park then instead. Then it would have been super successful until it burnt down or something, of course.
Yeah, yeah, right. Turn it into a Luna Park, maybe.
Yeah, see, then it would
Yeah.
have lasted till maybe the 1930s before it burnt down.
Yeah.
Oh, geez, yeah, but I've never heard of Happy Land. Mind you, I mean, I'm not a
No, it's.
native of Winnipeg. I've
I
been
bet
there
you.
a number of times, but
Yeah, I bet a lot of people from Winnipeg have never heard of Happy Land.
yeah, I bet you're right.
Yeah. All right, Misericordia Hospital.
Wow.
Yeah, there was one of these in Edmonton as well, Misericordia. I think that's something to do with the church, that word, Misericordia.
It could be, yeah,
Mhm.
because if you're dying of tuberculosis, you need a big, beautiful dome with another little dome on top.
Well, the air exchange, like you said,
Well, I mean,
right?
it's part of it, sure, but to catch the wind, yeah, but I mean, does it need to be a Greco-Roman revival, quote unquote, with all those pillars and then a big, beautiful metal dome? Or can it
Mm,
just be a wind-catching tower? Well, it
mhm.
could, but no, we're going to make it all super fancy because spare no expense, even for a hospital.
Yeah.
Wow, with the big pillars on the front entrance, too.
And
Of
the
course, you got to
elevated
go up.
entrance.
Yeah, I was going to say, of course, you got to go up 114 million stairs, and I bet you there's a
Mm-hmm.
door in that dark cavity underneath
Under
the
here.
stairs. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's nice though. It's a beautiful looking building. That reminds me of last summer or the summer before I did a boots on the ground of Rouleauville here, and there's an old convent there, and it has that style of roof with the dormer
Yeah,
windows in it
yeah.
like that.
Mansard, I think we call it a mansard style roof, possibly. With all these sticking out.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't
but
have
the
it. I thought it
convent
had it
doesn't
up.
have that cupola on top with the dome though.
Maybe it did.
Maybe.
Who knows? Old Hotel Winnipeg. Look at the decoration here too. Even
Yeah. Jeez, so nice.
up here
What
too.
a
All of
beauty.
that. Mm-hmm.
I love seeing
This.
the streetcars in the foreground too, the old trolleys. I love those things, man.
Yeah, yeah. Again, we have the brick streets. I think we can confirm that Winnipeg did have cobble style streets at this point in the presentation.
Yeah, yeah, I would say
Right.
it's probably at least this is the third or fourth that for sure you could tell, and it's probably you could throw in a couple more where it's 80% sure on some of the other photos. So yeah, it's pretty safe to say that Winnipeg, the downtown core, a lot of the main high streets, maybe the two or three main avenues that the trolley ran on, and then some of the more important main streets that had a lot of the post office and the city hall and all that probably were brick or cobblestone.
I'll also say too, whenever I see that work being done in northern climates, we get frost heaves,
Yeah,
which does a number on anything like that. Any sort of brick or that's laid into the ground, it doesn't last very long. It has to be done properly and done really well to last any amount of time.
yeah. But I
So,
think though, once let's say a hump does heave up, let's say it's 8 foot circumference and it heaves up a few inches and displaces a bunch of the brick. I think pulling out a bunch of bricks, stacking them on a pallet, re-leveling that hump, and then replacing those original bricks back in again is much easier to do than if it was paved and it had a big, huge crack in it and was
mm,
heaved up, and they'd have to rip all of that out with sledgehammers, then, regrade it, and then pour new concrete. This,
mm-hmm,
I think, would be more efficient in terms of time, and you could just reuse the brick.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So
Interesting.
I think in terms of maybe road maintenance, this was a smarter way to go back in the day with cobblestone or brick
Mm-hmm,
rather than paving it in big giant slabs of concrete.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I guess pre-asphalt days and all that stuff too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Early hotel, the Clarendon here. Didn't last very long. 1920, probably burned down. Not
Yeah,
sure.
that's not very long at all. 37 years. Not
Yeah.
much.
early time period for
It's a
Winnipeg.
shame because it looks like it was quite nice.
Mm-hmm.
Very stately looking. I mean, not super fancy, very modest, but stately looking.
Yeah, the interior's probably finished nicely, right? And all these
Oh yeah, with
windows.
the crystal chandeliers and the polished woodwork for sure. Hell, we even
Wainscoting.
we even saw that in the old photos that we looked at inside the Hudson's Bay that one time. Remember, like
Mm-hmm.
just the wood finishing in a department store. So imagine in a nice hotel.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, yeah. There's the Fort Garry, CN Rail.
Those CN and CP hotels are they're just above and beyond all the other hotels.
Not just railway people, right? Hotel people too.
That's right.
That should be the slogan.
Wow.
I
With all the
know.
tech on every little
Yeah.
peak and point and angle on that roof. It's got a little antenna or a tech piece on it.
Yeah, and the bump out balconies that come down like this and follows it all the way down. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can get a stateroom with a little bijou balcony and you can overlook the beautiful tree-lined street there.
Also basement maybe.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it looks like a retaining wall in front of those windows a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which I love to see in a lot of these old world pictures. Yeah.
That is such a beautiful place. Look at that.
Mm-hmm.
Look how overgrown the outbuildings are in front of it, though, with ivy.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's been that place has been there a long time.
Old, right? Old. Yeah. Bavarian feeling? Do you get a Bavarian
Yeah,
feeling?
yeah, kind of a yes, yeah, very,
Yeah.
you're right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Are you getting any background noise here on my end?
A little bit. It's not really loud though.
Okay. Let's see. Let's go to the next one. The Grange Hotel. Old West style.
A small little building, but still up on the top. Look how fancy it is.
Mm-hmm.
With the big arches on the top floor there and those two center windows with the big keystone and like it's tiny place, but it's still really beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And then on either side of it, a little wooden house.
Yeah, little gable. This is what you expect, right?
Yeah, or even that 2-story wooden building next to the house there.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
a mercantile or something there, maybe, or an apartment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But that hotel, that coffee house, I mean, and again, low windows there in the front between the two sets of stairs.
Yes, there. Yeah. I know. And down the side, you see them down the side.
Yeah, underneath those big, long, narrow windows.
Yeah.
Does that say 1858 on it, on the front?
Where are we looking here? Here? 18. Here?
Yeah. Does that say 58?
It's hard to say. That's a good shout. It looks a little square on this side. Hard to say, though.
Huh.
Yeah. The Grange Hotel. The Leland Hotel.
Yeah, that's a beauty, too. Look at that fancy main entrance. So they've got some kind of gazebo thing on top of it or something.
Yeah, you can probably walk out onto there. It looks like.
Yeah, maybe have your tea or coffee out there or something.
Look at this thing.
Strange. Yeah, what the hell does that thing do?
Strange.
It looks like it's another little observation thing inside there, it looks like.
Yeah, you could go up in there and look out from there. You're probably right. Yeah, you're probably right.
What the hell is that?
Yeah. Nice hotel, nice looking. I love to stay in a place like
that. That street looks dirt, though, to me. That street looks like a dirt road where they've put like a section where you could cross.
Here?
Yeah, like planks or boardwalk where you could cross without getting all muddy.
And then, and you're not seeing the rail car tracks in here at all either. So probably in a different location. But burned down in 1999.
Oh, what a shame.
Right? Yeah. Interesting looking roof. Very unique, actually.
You mean to tell me in the year 2000 they couldn't put out a fire in a building? I mean, this isn't a huge building. I mean, it's big by old world standards. It's a big building, but by modern standards today, to the year 2000, firefighting, they just like how out of control of a blaze would that be that it burnt down, considering the outside of it is all brick and masonry.
I know. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Obviously slated for demolition at some level for development.
Obviously it was purposely torched.
The lot was more valuable than the building, as they say. right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another one that burned down.
Burned down in 1899. Didn't last 10 years, apparently, this one. 1890s it was built.
Wow.
That's what we're told.
Look at the conical domes on that thing too, man.
Even the picture itself isn't clear. It's fading away from our memory. This is all that's left of this place, I would
The
suspect.
Manitoba Hotel. What a beauty.
Mm-hmm.
What an old world
Yeah,
butte that is. Wow.
for sure. And then that's it burnt after the fire, apparently. That
Oh,
yeah,
terrible. What a shame.
I know. Yeah. Oh, Mariachi's, Hotel, another hotel. We're in a hotel string of photos right now, so yeah, another hotel, but fairly simple. But still, you're still getting,
It's
the
the
look.
it's the eave along the roof line there. The
Yeah,
soffit.
yeah,
Look at that. You're right. Even still, very modest and small, but still a lot of fancy, skilled
yeah,
stonework going into. Even if those are plaster cast, it's still
yeah.
awfully fancy and it's still a lot of work.
Of course, yeah, and faded from history too. A lot of these
The
places just
weird
gone.
jalopy parked in the front with a single headlight in the middle. Did you see that?
Yeah, I was looking at that with the big tire. I was just
Yeah,
checking that out too.
it's like an old steam. It's probably an old steam powered truck,
Cool, very interesting.
like to
And
make
this
deliveries and stuff.
this is the grotto in their bar in that hotel we just looked at. Isn't that strange? It's like I don't know, just a weird look.
So the narrative is that they carved out a tavern under that hotel to make it look like an old grotto.
Kind of, yeah, yeah.
When probably they found this like this and altered it slightly and said, "Oh yeah, we made this to look like a cool grotto underground bar."
Yeah. Yeah, strange. I'd love to check places like this out, if they were still around. So much exploring. I mean, there still is so much exploring to be done, but so much has gone by the wayside at this point in time.
Yeah,
Lost a
some of
lot.
it we can never go back because they're long gone. It's a shame,
Yeah, it is, yeah. Marlsborough Hotel.
Yeah, that's a beauty too, with the different facade brick on the front, and then you can see down the sides where it changes color there that they use. That's just that standard brick.
Siding brick, maybe, and then front face brick.
The front facading brick is that darker,
Yeah,
probably that textured brick.
sure. Okay, yeah. Cheaper. This stuff would be cheaper because no one's really going to look at it too hard,
Yeah,
maybe.
but you want your front to be all fancy because you're a hotel or whatever, right? So
Uh-huh.
they use that brick on the front. Dave Ebony, that buddy of mine who has a channel
Uh-huh. Yeah.
over in England, he would call this a classic Victorian tart up. The
Tart up.
Victorians found the basic red brick building, and then they refacaded the front with all the accoutrement and the stone or the fake stone and that textured facade brick to make it all fancy wedding cake tarted up looking. That's kind of his theory on it.
Sure.
Is, that
Yeah.
when these were founded, they were actually found, and they needed some work, and in order to justify that, we own this building, we renovated it.
Yeah.
And
fancied it up.
renovate, in other words,
Yeah. Make it new.
reclaim ownership on it.
Yeah. Call it new and
Call it new.
Yeah,
And
renovate.
Bob's your uncle. Yeah.
Good one. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. I don't know. Do you want to jump in and share some of what you have soon here? Or?
Yeah, sure. Whenever you're ready, let me know. I don't have a lot. I just have a few, and it's mostly railroad related,
sure.
of course.
I got a few more hotel. Maybe we can stop at the hotels before we get.
Sure.
I'm just past halfway on this, so I got lots here.
Okay. And let me know if you want to take a break or anything like that too, because I do have a little bit of that video that's a couple minutes long. If you want to, I could let that play, and we can mute our mics, and you can take a little bit of a, a couple of minute break if you need to, I don't know, top up your coffee or what have you, and
Sure. Yeah. Let's do that shortly here. I'll do a couple more and then I'll hand it off to you.
Okay, perfect.
The Seymour Hotel. We got the dome on the corner.
And the rarely seen arch windows built into the part of the dome like that, which takes extra work because the extra angles that you have to figure out.
Oh God, I can't imagine building that. Oh wow, I never thought of that.
I mean, a dome is complicated enough, but a dome with 3 arched windows sticking out of it like that.
You'd think you'd want to just leave that part.
It's much more complicated mathematics.
Absolutely.
And schematics and blueprints and work and expense.
Yeah, good point.
It
Good
is
point.
beautiful, though. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
We'll do 4 more here, and then I'll break. I got just an old hotel coming from. These are going way back. A lot of these ones here, old bricker, right? Even there, you can see though.
Yeah,
See the little.
yeah, fancy, made to look like sort of tassels hanging over the arched windows on both floors. And this is the type of old world building that I find in. I was telling you earlier, these little rural towns that I might stop in on my way to visit, my sister that lives in Pincher Creek or whatever. And, we stop for gas in a little town that's got maybe 100 people in it. And you take a cruise down their main road and you'll see a building, 2, maybe 3 like this. And I'm thinking, even in this little town in the middle of nowhere in Alberta, 2 hours from any drive of any major city, there's these old world red brick buildings just popping up out of the flat prairies. Absolutely no business being there,
Yeah.
Small and modest, but still so out of place.
Yeah. It's strange. Yeah. There's something about it that it draws you to it. This is that same building on the inside. Now,
But see,
I
look
thought,
at all that hammered tin, pressed tin on the walls and ceilings. Like that is fancy for that little place, man.
and this thing here, this little that stove
Yeah,
sort of
the
thing going on
potbelly
in the middle.
stove. Yeah,
Yeah, it's spittoons maybe down here.
probably. Yeah, probably spittoons.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Good
right on.
call. And look at that's the wooden pillars on either side of that stove, right? That's not a basic arch. It's almost got a Moorish
Yeah, here.
kind of a arch to it, and then the little squares covering it, is that mosaic tile maybe?
It's a good question, or some sort of wallpaper. It's hard to say. Hard
But
to say.
labor intensive either way.
All of it again, no square inch left. To everything here, everything done with purpose. Wainscot. I mean, this is what we aspire to these days. If you're trying to do a pub that looks pretty cool and kind of making it look old world, I finished a few pubs like this. They
Yeah.
want this look, right? They want to
Yes.
duplicate this look, but it's so much work, so much
So
work.
so this is a perfect example inside of this would be right around the time of your cowboys, Wild West, think, Clint Eastwood spaghetti Western style movies where they come into a hotel to stay the night. There's, a few rooms upstairs. There's the main lobby. There's probably a saloon off to the side or at the back. There might be a barber shop connected to it. And that's it. Maybe they serve meals in the saloon, or maybe there's a cafe. But even still, you look at the Hollywood narrative, this would all just be wooden boards in the walls. Whereas you see the actual photo of that actual time period, and it's fancy as hell.
So we can safely say the real thing is so much better than the Hollywood version.
Exactly.
Right? So much better. What do we have here?
Look at that.
That's the post office again. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
With
an
those
old world structure.
huge columns with the torch field on top. Jeez.
Yeah. All right, last one here, and then I'll cut over to Land Titles Office, demolished 1912. Look, there's the chimneys, right? The big prominent chimneys.
Yep. There's 2 on one side, 1 on the other.
Yeah.
So I think that's
right.
part of that air exchange.
Yeah.
And again, kind of modest, but this is 3 floors. Again, those windows in the roof.
Not an easy build.
Nope. Arched windows still. Still got to go up a couple steps to get in. And there's something funny it looks like right along the bottom under those front windows there.
Here?
Yeah.
Yeah,
something
possibly.
Weird there, maybe.
Yeah. Not see. Obviously, old obscure photograph, but yeah.
Very stylized, even for just a modest little building. I mean, they didn't need to build that roof like that with that sort of curved kick out sort of detail to it like that. They could have just built a basic roof and call it a day, but to put that much care and attention, extra effort, again, extra expense, it's beautiful.
And let's remind everybody watching that Winnipeg, nothing going on until 1880, basically.
Yeah.
Right. So from what you've seen in this last little while, from all these 88 pictures I've shared so far, we're looking at a metropolis of a city, well established, deeper into time, much deeper into time than we're told.
Yeah, I would agree with you 100%. Yeah.
All right. I'll hand it back to you. I'll stop sharing.
Those were some great shots. Oh, as always, you always come with You always come packing some great photographs and great old shots of the old postcards too. Just mind-boggling stuff.
I enjoy the dig. I love digging for this stuff. It's really fun.
It is. It's even I had a good time. Like I said, I think maybe I have half a dozen pictures. I downloaded quite a few, but then I went through and scrutinized them really carefully. And for you blow them up too much, they pixelate. So I kind of got rid of some of them. But yeah, it's fun discovering this stuff.
Yeah.
Especially when it's something that's technically in your own backyard. And we're not really taught a lot about our own nation's history. So for our community, this is the best way to kind of dive into it, because we can examine the official narrative and then examine some of the evidence that we find, and we can sort of debunk the official narrative as we're in real time discovering stuff with these photos.
Yeah, and I hope that's what we're doing. Just through basic logic, we're trying to illustrate the discrepancy between the official narrative and what we're seeing with our own eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to take a little bit of a break? It's about roughly 5 minutes.
Let's do it.
And then we can come back, and maybe I could share a few of my photos, and then we can maybe finish it off with a few more of yours, just to kind of round it out.
Sure. Yep. Sounds good.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So yeah, we'll take a little bit of a break. I'm going to share a little video that I found here of this was. Just got to find the right file. I'm getting better at labeling now. Now I'm labeling the file for today instead of just odds and sods or something. It's labeled Winnipeg. So I'm like, oh, that's got to be it. So here it is, a little video of old Winnipeg. This footage from the very, very early to mid 1920s, some street scenes of old Winnipeg. All right, so we're back, and that's some footage I found from the Winnipeg City Archives, and so it's public domain, free to use. I just put some old timey music to it. But the thing that I
That's good.
loved about it is anything with that old footage I love, because you can see the buildings, but you can see the vehicles. You can see the people and how they're dressed and how they make about the hustle and bustle of their day back 100 years ago. I find that fascinating. Not quite as crisp and clear as the photos you have, but with it being moving pictures per se, it's kind of neat. Also, it's
Yeah,
just too bad
it was
that
interesting.
that old footage is always a little bit too grainy, unfortunately. But neat fun.
Yeah, for sure. I enjoyed that. Yeah.
I love seeing all the old jalopies cruising around.
The different world, really. Even going as far back as less than 100 years, really, we live in a different time now than back then. It's so much different. Cleaner. It's feeling much cleaner.
Yeah, and people just took the time to, I don't know, dress up, even if they were just going to the market. Whereas today, I mean, I see people all the time in my local little neighborhood food store. It's kind of like a convenience store, but a little bigger, so they have more groceries and that sort of thing. And
Yeah.
I see people in there, and they just throw on like flip flops, and they're wearing their pajama bottoms, and they throw their winter coat and their toque or their knit hat or whatever you want to call it, and people just don't care, anymore.
No, no, I know. And then the level of homelessness that we're seeing these days across the board is it's really bad in my hometown here even, and you just don't even see that in a lot of the old footage. You know.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
right. You hardly ever see, not until you start seeing photos and video footage in and around the Great Depression. But prior to that,
Mm-hmm.
you don't see a lot of people looking down and out, sitting on the, I don't know, up against the side of a building with their hand out, wearing rags necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, at least not like we see today, unfortunately.
And the
You
drug
know,
problems of today, right? It's quite different. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. A lot of the substances today, it's, get a hold of you. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I'm sure back then there was addiction problems with alcohol, and of course, opium was,
Mm-hmm.
and heroin too. Actually, heroin and cocaine goes back to before the early 1900s. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but I think people were, I don't know, there was maybe more of a sense of community and helping each other out, keeping an eye out for each other
Mm-hmm.
back then.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least by what we're told, how people lived, than the narrative too. A lot more people went to church, and there was, say what you want about organized church and how deceiving it can be, and contributes to the false narrative. But back then, I mean, that was sort of the hub of the community too, right? Especially in a little town, everything revolved around the church, and that's how you got to know your neighbor. And if you needed to rely on your neighbors to help you out, or they could rely on you to help them out, it was all done through just meeting up after church events or whatever.
That's right. It's a platform for community involvement and cohesiveness, and yeah,
Yeah.
it's falling by the wayside nowadays.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got a couple of pictures here, as I mentioned, that are kind of sort of more to do with Winnipeg, with the railroad, more than anything else. But again, the area that we're looking at here is just Manitoba's right here, sort of central Canada, and Winnipeg pretty much right in the middle of the province from east to west too. So this is the Canadian Pacific Railway main head office in Winnipeg.
Mm.
Beautiful building with this clock here and these big, huge, sort of carved, I don't know, stone pieces. I'd imagine. I don't know if
Yeah.
it's not all one big piece, I don't think. But again, big columns. And I mean, this is, it's not a courthouse. I mean, this is a private company. This is a railway company. So,
Yeah.
but much like their hotels are super fancy, I guess the head office had to be. And of course, we see down low here, but different sizes, because that's how you build a building. Is you want to say to the contractor, I want you to make it as inconvenient as possible if I need to replace some broken glass right at street level from all these horse and buggies going by, kicking up rocks and pebbles.
Yeah.
2 feet of snow in the winter, and we got to shovel it. And oops, I accidentally put my shovel through the window. But let's make them all different sizes. So if they all break, it's going to cost 3 times as much to replace them.
Now
Because they
this
all
is
got to be custom size as opposed to a uniform size.
CPR. This one is Canadian Pacific.
Yeah, this is Canadian Pacific Railway. Yeah.
I think that there was one in Edmonton that was almost identical as well, if I recall. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just this always like, really? If you're going to
Mhm.
goof around with those goofy half-buried windows, at least make them one consistent size. It makes it a little easier of a pill to swallow.
Mm-hmm.
This
Wow.
is the same building, but I found this photo to be odd because
Yeah.
this building looks like it's had the hell beat out of it. There's all
Yeah.
kinds of crumbling. At first, I thought, oh, is this construction?
Mm-hmm.
But it's not, because this is some crumbling here in those lower windows, it looks like to me.
Something up at the roof line too. Something strange with the right side and the left side
In here.
seem to be different. Yeah, the right side looks, I don't know, just doesn't. There's this imbalance there with the roof line.
Yeah,
Strange.
and it looks like there's, I don't know. First, I thought these were like cables and holding up some scaffolding, but the scaffolding looks like it's in between. I don't know. It's really weird.
It is strange. Yeah.
But it's not. It wasn't labeled as a construction photo. It was just in the CP website's archive, photo archive.
Yeah.
So
Probably trying to pass it off as a construction photo.
yeah, but it looks really weird because there's all kinds of debris and mud and dirt and stuff in here. Oh,
Interesting.
anyway, yeah.
It's a nice building, that's for sure. Old world.
Here it is
100%.
looking. Here it is looking.
Yeah.
Absolutely beautiful, and I love how once they transition to the electric diesel trains, they've got the old steam engine parked out here in the park out front across the street. So that's kind of nice. And then the photographer managed to catch a cable car going by too. So that was kind of cool.
Very, very trainy. Very trainy.
I love them old trains, buddy.
Those
I love them.
steam engines are something else. The engineering involved with all those, that's old world tech.
Oh, yeah.
It. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. This is 1883, by the way.
Wowzers. Yeah. Crazy.
So this is, not only is it the main office for CP in Winnipeg, but it's also the main terminal. It's a station too. So it's double duty.
Probably beautiful. Is this the inside?
This is the CN, Canadian National, inside Union Station.
Oh, yeah. That's easy to build, though. Those domes?
Yeah, you just want all of this complicated angles built in a round.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not a rectangular or square building. It's round, and then with a dome, and then arches within the dome. That's super, super easy to build.
It is. Yeah. There's not a lot of technical wizardry involved with that, is there?
No, just again, a couple of guys with some plaster and some trowels, no problem.
Yeah.
This is decorated for the holiday season.
Beautiful.
Inside. You can see inside, they have restaurants and cafes. So you're not just coming in here to catch the train coming and going. This people, when they traveled back then, it was a big deal too. You see everybody's dressed nice. This is obviously a much later picture, 1924, but just beautiful inside.
Yeah. Everything mattered, even as transitioning into the new world. The memory of the old world and how everything mattered so much is carried over and was still an imprint on the society, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. This I loved because you got the train and all the people, and obviously people are aware that there's a photographer, a bit of a photo op, some people actually posing for the camera, sure, but I just love the fact that this is just a train station.
Is that a brick street there?
Looking
like we have some
maybe
pavers on the left there.
Like we're having something under this guy too, like like the sewage,
sewer,
rain gutters, maybe.
Yep.
This is the streetcar, obviously the end of the line here.
They look like a lot of fun. riding those streetcars. It looked like it'd be something to do on a Sunday. Take the kids out, ride the streetcar through the city.
Sure, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I just loved how you get the modern tech here and here, but then you still have, the horse and buggy and behind all
Yeah.
these bicycles lined up.
Yeah.
Again, big, huge arch here, which is kind of funny looking window inside it. But,
Yeah.
just a regular train station, but big, beautiful brick building with a big, complicated, multi-angled roof line and all that again,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to this, wooden barn over here, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So definitely looking more old world to me.
Yeah, for sure.
So this is that Canadian National. We saw the inside.
Yeah. Okay.
This is the
Yeah.
outside of it here. And
Wow.
again, you've got, horse and buggy, but also jalopies at this point. But this thing is there's the main rail yard, obviously, in the background. Like 17 tracks, I think, is what I counted.
Wow.
You can see coming in from here, coming in from here, coming in from here, everywhere. But it's sort of a dome on top of a dome or within a dome. I've never seen anything like that before.
Yeah, it's big. It's really big. The dome's gone now, I think. It's a Via Rail station now.
Yeah, the dome I think is gone now.
They say this
Big,
opened in 1911.
massive entrance. Look at this.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Ridiculous.
But again, there's that beautiful tree-lined street.
Mm-hmm.
Massive structure too. You can just tell by the size of these cars. This is just a huge building.
Yeah.
Definitely old world.
1911, they say.
This is, again, just a basic train station, not a main terminal or anything.
This is in Winnipeg? There's a bunch of these in Winnipeg, eh?
Yeah, this is Winnipeg. This is just a Canadian Pacific station.
Crazy.
Again, just absolutely beautiful because, you want all this for just to get on and off the train and have some porter pull your luggage off for you.
Rounded tops on the chimney there. See the rounded top?
Yeah. Over here, too, each corner has one.
Interesting.
Funny little wooden shack, the crappy thing that they've just built on the front of this.
Mm-hmm. Didn't even go above the window above it there.
Yeah, obviously this is some more modern afterthought.
Mm-hmm.
This one struck me as odd. This is obviously the street trolley or street car.
Yeah.
Beautiful building in the background, but why is it all smashed to hell?
Yeah.
Is what I was wondering. I mean, it's on the road, on the track. You can see the track right here.
Mm-hmm.
You definitely see this is a dirt road, not cobblestone or brick.
Mm-hmm.
But you can see that it's on a track here.
It's not new.
Is it? Yeah, like did they just find this thing and they're dragging it along the track and taking it to, the train sheds to work on it, or like where the hell did this thing come from? That it's all. I mean, they're not going to let passengers ride in this thing, so why is it all smashed up like this?
Unless it's old and being taken out of use, which means it would have to be, it would have to be old, right? And this photo, when do you think that was taken? It looks like
this is going to be right around 1900, give or take. Most of these photos are between. I'm just trying to remember because to sort of put them in a certain order, I changed the labeling on them. But most of them were 1897, 98 in there to like really, really early 20s. Like 1923, 22, when you see some of the jalopies in some of the pictures, some of the old Ford cars, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, maybe it's being retired and taken out of service. But, I mean, to have almost every window smashed, it's just a weird photo to me. It's to me, this almost shows like, okay, they found this thing.
Yep.
And now they're going to go and fix it and put it into use. And they're going to hook a bloody horse onto the front of it.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
I think this is the same one you shared, maybe.
I don't know. The
street,
repurposing, right?
The wide street.
Yeah.
See, now we're talking. Like, that's how it should look if it's in use. Electric streetcar, and they use the overhead cable. We saw that in some of your photos and some of mine.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what I'm expecting it should look like.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to me, that looks in use, but in good shape. It looks new. There's a
Mhm.
bit of wearing here on the paint. Sure, it's Winnipeg, snow, all
Mhm.
that crap. But it's not this. But it's the
Mhm.
same car, like same
Mhm.
style of car.
Mhm. Neat looking
So
things. They are really neat looking too, aren't they? They're
yeah,
unique in certain areas, have very different looks than other areas.
definitely old world. And obviously, yeah, you're right. Winnipeg being a smaller city by the narrative, smaller
Mhm.
scale, trolley
Mhm.
size. But
There's a
and of
horse drawn.
course, you got to find one with a horse pulling it.
I
There you
love it.
go.
I love it.
Meanwhile, we've got electric going here. You got
Yep.
cables here. What's pulling this one then? This
Ooh,
one is running on electric. It's
maybe it's
not this,
electrified. No, you're
because
right.
these horses are pulling this guy's sled. It's winter here. Everybody's got sleds here. You see,
Yeah.
there's no wheels. Everybody's
Hmm.
got skids, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's winter. So these horses aren't pulling this. This is being powered by something, probably these cables overhead. So why is this poor creature having to pull this one?
Maybe it's not working. There's a short circuit somewhere.
Maybe like we have both generations of tech, because by their narrative they say, well, streetcars have been around for a long time, but first horses pulled them. Then after electricity was being used on a mass scale, then they went to electric. But
Well, I
these
knew it
look,
was coming,
yeah,
right? They knew it was
so they
coming,
didn't
but
bother changing the style. They knew that, well, it's going to be same. So we'll just build them all the same in anticipation of electricity coming in. Again, like anticipating these wide streets. But yeah, to
yeah,
see, okay, here's the horse one and here's the electric one. Like, get out of here with that. Like, give me a break.
it's the narrative falls flat on its face again with the horse-drawn
But there's
streetcar.
that beautiful building we were looking at in one of your photos,
Yeah, the
the
post
gingerbread
office.
style. Yeah, that's the one.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
But
is
yeah,
nice.
this just because when I first saw the photo, I'm like, oh, great, there's some trolleys in this photo. And then I looked and I'm like, wait a second. Why is this horse pulling one when this one's clearly being run on electric?
Yeah, yeah. I know it's
Uh,
strange. Yeah.
and then
Hard.
I also I also found that one that you found of Broadway, just
Yeah,
because it's such a beautiful
it is amazing.
photograph.
Yeah.
Obviously, your horse and buggy, and then later cars would go up and down here, and then your tram or streetcar or trolley, whatever you want to call them, running up and down the middle, and then the trees to separate. Just beautiful with the hotel in the background,
Mm-hmm.
and just all the tech you see here. Some crazy tower way back here.
Yeah.
Some domed thing over here on this. Some big wind catcher tower way back here. Like,
Go a little closer on that dome. Let's just and the one next to it. Not legislature, is it?
could be,
Yeah.
could be some church steeple or something here. I think one of those ones
Knox.
that the tops off.
Maybe
Maybe
that
the
Knox
Knox.
Church.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, beautiful, beautiful photo. And
It
again,
is.
even this roof. I mean, that's not easy.
No.
You know.
No. And it's brick. The building's brick, and the windows. You can see it all there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that photo. Just, I think
Yeah.
the narrative that we're given on Winnipeg, oh, it's this, it's the small, insignificant, insignificant,
Mm-hmm.
sort of prairie city, and nothing ever happens there. Nothing ever really has happened there. But
Mm-hmm.
I would beg to differ that at one point in the old world, it was a major, like, golden city.
Yeah.
It
I agree.
was, I mean, again, because of the transportation hub narrative that we're given for then and now, even still, Winnipeg's very important in terms of train, trucks, uh, waterway shipping, all of that. Even today, very, very important city.
And it well,
Major airport there, the whole bit.
if we tie that in with the lakes in the area and the mud flooded. If everything was mudded and flooded throughout the continent, you can imagine just it's sweeping through that area, and creating the landscape even, or
Yeah,
affecting the landscape in that area, having to dig this metropolis of the old world out, because it is, from what we've seen, it's unbelievable the structures that they had there for what they're telling us.
yeah, absolutely. I do believe that Winnipeg was a grand old world city, just like Detroit used to be,
Hmm.
or just like San Francisco. It's just we've had it drilled into our heads as Canadians that, well, there's nothing going on there because there never has. It's never really gotten any bigger than a few, a couple 100,000 people, and there's nothing there, never was, never really will be. But I think at one point there was millions of people living in Winnipeg, and it was all
Hmm.
built up as a big old world sort of, for the region of what we now call Canada. It was at one point, a major hub city in an old world.
Exactly. Right, and they don't have structures like the legislature in a city that doesn't have some sort of significance. Right.
Precisely. And
It's like,
buildings like that post office. I mean, come on, man.
so
Or
the
that
capital,
hotel.
they must have been preordained. The capitalization of these cities must have been known by whoever these inheritors were coming through these forces. The crown and the governments.
Yeah, the Northwest Mounted Police, in conjunction with the fur trading companies, Hudson's Bay Trading Company,
On
um,
behalf of the crown,
on
right?
behalf of the Crown of England,
Hmm.
sending in guys like David Thompson and stuff to figure out what happened post reset
Hmm.
out here.
But
So
knowing
he
these
made his way.
locations,
Sorry.
knowing these locations for sure,
Yeah,
right?
and sending back what condition they were in, and
Hmm.
from there they would sort of know what to develop where first and how to designate. This city becomes the capital of what's going to be this province,
Hmm.
and so on and so forth.
Hmm.
Because it was in the late 1700s and late 1700s, early 1800s that David Thompson made his way from Ontario out through the provinces and eventually to where you are into British Columbia.
Hmm.
And he made a few trips. He didn't just make it all one trip. He made multiple trips over multiple years back and forth.
Hmm.
And for a couple of different fur trading companies, as mentioned. So, you get European eyes that are bankrolled by the controllers coming out here really early on, quite early after the reset.
Hmm.
And it's very easy for them to say, oh, nothing out here but Indians. But meanwhile, well, I mean, that's what we're fed is the narrative. But meanwhile, the ones that are bankrolling the whole thing
Hmm.
and are going to be taking over and rolling out the new narrative, the ones that are going to be staking their claim on some of these rediscovered or founded,
Hmm.
basically found buildings and cities, then they say, okay, this is going to be, Edmonton, this will be the capital, this will be Winnipeg, this will be Saskatoon or Regina.
Hmm.
I mean, Regina is an old world name, and that's why
Yeah.
that city got the name Regina.
Toronto was an old world name too, I would say.
Yeah, and then of course, Victoria. They start giving these cities in Canada these royal designated sounding names, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
St. John's. I mean, there's St. John's and St. John,
I
both
know
in
that's
Canada, right?
always been confusing on that one. Always.
And we have Prince Edward Island,
Yeah.
and Nova Scotia means New Scotland,
We yeah. We have Prince George and Prince
Prince
Rupert
George,
out
Prince
here in.
Rupert, Prince Albert.
Hmm.
We have, yeah, all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Queen Victoria. I mean, obviously Victoria, but every city's got a Victoria Avenue. We still celebrate Queen Victoria's birthday in Canada. It's a national holiday. So, yeah, the crown is a big part of the narrative here
Hmm. Hmm.
to help disguise the old world
Yeah.
that was buried.
Yeah. And if you get into even the royal family, the British royal family, you find out that the existing British royal family actually usurped the throne back around this time period, where the bloodlines that are in place right now um, had are basically imposters of the actual lineage of the British crown that used to exist in those seats, apparently.
Yes, that's
So,
right.
so
Yeah,
it's kind of
yeah.
interesting as well.
Yeah, because
Um,
you had the whole Tudors thing and the War of the Roses and all of that stuff.
yeah, yeah.
And then you had Queen Victoria up until Queen Elizabeth II. Queen Victoria had been the longest
Hmm.
running monarch or the longest ruling monarch
Hmm.
and she was the grandmother to all these guys that eventually became. They were all cousins, and they were
Yeah.
all the kings of all these European nations, right? England and the Tsar of
The
Russia,
Tsar of Russia. Yeah. Yeah.
and what's his name, Habsburg, and all them.
Hmm.
So
Can you see this building?
yep, I just hit add to stream, so yeah, I can now.
So there's the Parliament.
That's the Parliament building in Winnipeg. Yeah, looks a lot like the Edmonton.
It does. It does. Similar. I watched a video on this,
Mind you,
and
they all look very similar.
yeah, right. A lot of Masonic symbology built into this structure. Um, and well, they even say with the Masons that they basically hijacking the previous um, legitimate Freemasons. Michelle Gibson, I don't know if you're familiar with her work.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
She talks about the Moorish Freemasons, who were the actual builders of this old world civilization, right? So even what we know of as these Freemasonic societies are imposters, I think, impersonating um, what probably was part of a builders guild of the old
Hmm.
world,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
I work with a guy who's a Freemason, like he's in the Masonic Lodge and all that stuff, and
mhm,
he's a nice enough guy and everything. But
mhm.
I mean, this guy wouldn't be able to build a garden shed if you gave him $10,000. Like he's just not handy at all. But it's funny because then he goes to his meetings and they put on the white stone cutters, leather apron with all the badges and symbols on it. That's,
Mhm,
this thousands of years old tradition of stonework
mhm,
and how it's passed down through their symbology, and
mhm,
because it's ancient mystery school technology and all this stuff. And I'm like, get
mhm.
out of here, buddy. You couldn't build a front porch. you know Nothing
Can you
against him. He's just not one of those guys that's
sure?
handy. He's not like you. He's handy with a hammer and nails. He's just not
Yeah,
like that, right?
it's not a builders guild. It's a gentleman's
Yeah,
club,
it's a
something like that, right?
fraternity is really
Yeah,
what it is now, more than anything.
yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
You see these sphinxes here? Here's one. There's another one there. You
I
see
never
those?
noticed that. See, because you got
Yeah.
to have a sphinx in Manitoba,
Does that make any sense at all?
right?
Yeah,
Do they
and
even
then
know what sphinxes were in Winnipeg, Manitoba in the late 1800s?
that's a good point. Yeah.
Like Egypt wasn't really a thing until the 20s, we're told, right? Is when it sort of became a popular fad,
Hmm.
right? People started decorating their houses in like the newest style with like Egyptian little statues, and they started having Egyptian subject matter in the old silent movies, like the old Rudolph Valentino, the son of the pharaoh, and all this
Mm.
stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The early ones. Yeah. Interesting. This apparently was a 6-year window, 7-year window. Construction started in 1913, opened in 1920, July of 1920. We are told, right?
Jeez.
Kind of an interesting story. I watched a video on this little. This is a golden boy up here, golden statue or whatever it is.
Okay.
Um, Supposedly they were having that built by a statue maker in France, and this is during World War One. And his fact is what would it be? Shop, I guess, factory that he made his statues in was bombed by the Germans or the Axis, and all the statues in the shop were destroyed except for this golden boy who survived the bombing. Eventually, this golden boy statue gets shipped onto, um, yeah, it gets put onto a ship to cross the Atlantic, and what happens? The ship gets commandeered by U.S. forces in World War One. The golden boy gets basically buried under all sorts of cargo and forgotten for several years, till
Uh-huh.
eventually it surfaces several years later and makes its way to the Manitoba legislature, and they put it on top. So it was
And
really long, a long-winded story. I thought was funny.
yeah, that sounds like a crazy story because you're going to want to contact some goldsmith way of over in France in the
Yeah,
early 1900s to make you a statue. You can't just have
yeah.
one made in Montreal where
No,
there's going
no.
to be French workers and skilled craftsmen there that are probably come from the old country and would have the same skill set. Uh, you know, uh,
It's
No,
ridiculous.
there's no French artisans in Montreal at all. At
No.
all.
Montreal is spectacular, by the way. Old World City. Woo.
Oh yeah,
Wow.
it's a World UNESCO site
Yeah.
too. The old Montreal, the old port, is one of the oldest parts of North America. Also,
Yeah, I
of course,
started a file.
they say that about Halifax. They say that about St. John's. They say it about Quebec City. They say it about Montreal. These are the oldest cities in North America. Well, one of them's got to be the oldest.
Yeah, which one is it? Yeah.
I've heard Quebec City, and I've heard St. John's.
Yeah.
I think Quebec City might be the oldest walled city in North America, is maybe the distinction, because St. John's is not a walled city.
Oh,
But
yeah.
apparently St. John's is freaking old. I mean, it's right there in Newfoundland, so it's right on the easternmost tip of Canada, right? So
founded earlier.
Founded the earliest. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Coming from the Europe on the shipping,
Yeah, it would have been,
the
right?
ocean currents, right?
Sure. Yeah, it would have been. Yeah. Early legislature building. We might have saw this briefly earlier, but
look at all the tech on that thing.
Very techy, I know. Yeah.
Wow.
Flour mill.
Yeah, I remembered seeing this one too, because there's the whole Ogilvy and Robin Hood narrative in Eastern Canada and in Manitoba. Some pictures you see, some old pictures of Winnipeg, you see in the background of the Ogilvy mill, this one. And then in some of the wider shots, you can see that there's also a Robin Hood flour mill in the same shot. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Competitors.
Yeah.
I love the old stacks, the old brick stacks too. I think this is leftovers from the old world. You can see the structure here with the similar mansard style roof. And
yeah. I would go along with that too. And then they just added on those buildings on the side and connected them to windows and bashed out the window, put a doorway in and connected it. Yeah.
That's how it looks sort of to me. Yeah. Yeah. I'll go through a few more. Orange Lodge.
Yes, they were big here in Canada, weren't they?
Yeah, I read a little blurb on that too. Had a major influence on a lot of these cities in Canada. Yeah.
The George Murdoch, who was the first mayor of Calgary. He was the mayor when Calgary had our Great Fire.
Okay.
He's originally from Chicago and lived there when they had their Chicago fire, by the way.
Yeah. Lucky guy. He must have had matches in his pocket.
Yeah. Maybe the cow he used to kick over the lantern in Chicago, he brought with him to Cowtown, Calgary, Alberta.
Cowtown, there you go.
Well, that's why I have that picture up in the top right corner of our screen there. It's the picture of Stephen Avenue, downtown Calgary, with a freaking cow standing in the middle of the road.
Yeah.
But apparently, not only was he a Freemason and a member of the fire brigade, but he was also a member of the Orange Club as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And they were pretty widespread, a lot of these that Orange Club. I saw they had a major influence. So I'd never heard of it before, actually. So there's the Carnegie again. Here, I'll roll through what I got left. May as well get it all the visuals. So
those Carnegies are always so suspicious, because whether it's somewhere in Idaho, somewhere in Canada, somewhere in, I don't know, Utah, they pretty much all look, if not identical, very, very similar. Yeah. So again, it's just if a building looks like this, we'll rubber stamp it as that's a Carnegie library. Ka-chunk. Okay, narrative done for that one. What's next?
I'm starting to think about all that as like components on a circuit board, and what all these things as part of the old city and cities and how they flowed, and each structure has its own purpose as a part of the whole. Because you start to see the patterns.
Component contributed to the overall functioning of the city.
That's right, yeah. Because the patterns repeat themselves, don't they? And you start to see them everywhere, like it was a blueprint.
Yeah, that's why everybody in this community at some time or another has just exclaimed literally out loud, as they're doing, like you and I right now looking at photos, or whether they're out doing a boots on the ground and they're standing in front of a building. These all look the same, no matter what city, in what part of the world you're in.
That's right.
The city hall or the state capitol building looks the same. The post office looks the same. The courthouse looks the same.
Yeah. And even though they had different architects and contests and
built hundreds of years apart, thousands of miles away from each other in different countries on different continents.
Doesn't seem to matter, does it? Yeah, it's funny. Yeah. Now this one they're calling the never built. We're told Richardson Building. You can see it here lit up. I always wondered, was it built, or did it actually stand, and was it torn down, or was it always just something that they had in mind but
So
never?
they're just trying to say this is sort of an artist conception or an
Yeah,
artist's proposal to what they were planning on building, and they just never built it.
that's what they're trying to say. Yeah, but I don't
Seems
know,
like an awfully. It seems like more than just a sketch.
doesn't it? It feels like a sketched photo, doesn't
It
it?
feels like it's a photo, and they sketched over it to make it look like they sketched it, like they did the old school photo manipulation thing
Mm-hmm.
on it. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean?
Yep. Yep.
So to make it look like, oh no, we were just proposing this. This is just an artist's rendition of the proposal of the building to submit to the corporate backers, and they decided they didn't want to fund it or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But who knows?
Exactly.
It could have been. I mean, you showed just in this stream a couple of examples of actual photographs that you have of a building that was stood for 10 years and then they knocked it down.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
built in the late 1800s, and it stood. That one they knocked down in 1899 or whatever. Like, come on.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't make
What'd you even
sense.
build it for then? If you're,
It's so wasteful, right?
or why'd you
Yeah.
build it out of stone and make it look like a castle if you were going to knock it down? Why not build it a wood frame building if you knew that, well, it's just going to be a temporary courthouse until we get the permanent one built? So make it out of wood. Don't make
Yeah.
it to look like a castle or whatever.
Yeah, I know exactly.
I mean, thanks for doing it. It's beautiful, and we can look back on it and appreciate it. But didn't the folks back then tap some of these foremen and people in charge of these construction companies, walk up to them and tap on the shoulder and say, "Hey, buddy, times are hard. Where are you getting all the money to build this beautiful building? I can't even eat. I can't afford to
Exactly.
feed my children. And I
Exactly.
work for you, buddy. I'm a laborer on your job site, and I can't
Yeah.
afford to buy food. Where are we
Can't
getting the
even
money
put
to
a
build this thing?"
exactly. Can I get a window in my shack? Right?
Yeah.
Nope.
Can I get some arched windows and brick in my house? No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Check
Jeez.
this one out. Manitoba College.
Jeez. It looks like it's out of a fairy tale, man.
Isn't it ridiculous?
Look at those, especially the two tower tops at the front of that. Like, look at that.
I know. What the heck is going on here?
That looks like one of the buildings that they would call the Transylvanian Pavilion at one of the old World
Fairs.
Expositions. Yeah.
Exactly. You're
There's
right.
a
Yeah.
World's Fair building from somewhere. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And they would say, "Oh, okay, we better say that this is the Bavarian Pavilion."
I think they had another name for it. I have another one here. They called
Manitoba
it Manitoba
College.
College. Same one. Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful
It's
building.
awfully fancy for some book learning.
That's
I mean,
true.
are they taking the classes outside and they're staring at the building all day? Because that sure would inspire you to, for higher learning. But these kids are sitting inside the classroom, so
Well, thankfully,
awfully fancy outside.
Carnegie's donating all sorts of books to the cause for the education. So thankfully, these buildings are up and ready to go for Carnegie's books.
Yeah, that's true. You could just wheel them right in the front door.
Yeah.
Up those 114 million stairs that are real convenient to get in and out of, by the way, in Winnipeg in the winter when they're covered in ice and snow for 8 months.
Oh, man.
You don't want to build it right at the ground level so it's easy to shovel. No. You want icy stairs. That's what you want. Icy stone steps.
Stairs are the best.
Yeah. They got to be stone too, so that when you fall, you for sure break a bone. Not a wooden stair that's got some give to it. No.
Yeah.
You want ice-covered stone stairs. Look at this.
St. Boniface
That's
College.
St. Boniface again. Yeah. Jeez.
No, this isn't the church, though. This is the church. This is a
school. Oh, there's a college. Right.
Yeah.
You talked about this. Yeah.
Must have had leftover domes, eh? They just plopped them down everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. We got so many, we'll even put it on this little short stumpy tower.
Yeah. So, I mean, the more I dug and the more I dig, doesn't matter where I look, the more I find. You can see, I can keep going deeper and deeper, and you just keep these structures.
Clock tower missing a clock.
Yeah.
They'll just tell you it's a portal. And maybe it was, but
yeah.
More than likely, the clock got yanked out of it.
Universities are real big hubs for old world buildings as well. Here you
have because they can use the excuse more easily. Because if somebody ever came along and said, "Why is there a cluster of old world buildings all within a few hundred feet of each other?" Oh, it's a university campus.
Exactly.
See, that's the engineering building, that's the science building, that's the arts building, that's the administration building. Oh,
Mhm.
okay.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Nothing to see here. Move along. Okay, got it.
Exactly. Yeah. United College, looking like a castle.
Yeah, because you want a cone-shaped dome, and then you want a multi-angled conical
Yeah.
dome too. So one's round, and then one's what, 8-sided, 6-sided cone? I don't know.
Yeah.
You want to
Yeah.
put both to cover all the bases because it's easy, just super easy.
Octagonal, maybe. Yeah. Fire. Did we see the fire hall? We might have seen. This might be a different fire hall than that
That's a
one. The other.
different fire hall. The other one, the tower was on the other side.
You're right. Yeah, you're right.
But see,
Okay.
that's to me, that's a wind catcher. And then they say, no, that's an observation tower to look out for the fire. And then
Mm.
the guy will ring the bell when he sees the fire. And then the horses run out them doors.
Yeah, yeah.
Which, sure, I mean, at some point it could be repurposed to that easily. But
Well, I'll go. I'll give you a theater here, Princess Theater. This is the Bijou Theater. This is part of that block we looked at with the dungeons underneath. So
okay,
very.
and the three buildings kind of all squished.
Yeah,
Like tall,
yeah,
skinny buildings was
yeah.
kind of a thing in the old world, too. I guess economy of space and,
Yeah.
and maybe
Part of
they share services or utilities easily
sure.
back then because
Probably connect to each other. I would suspect as well.
yeah, and I would imagine that, like, I believe that the steam system is old world for
Hmm.
these buildings.
Hmm.
So they could share, like, those three buildings all sandwiched together probably shared the same central steam system underneath in those
Sure. The
dungeons.
dungeons in the dungeons. Yeah, right. The Orpheum. Okay, so this is another part of the old world narrative I find interesting. They were very, very big on their theaters, like
Like live theater.
yes, opera houses and theaters. Um,
The opera house always struck me as more unusual than the live theater. The live theater, I could sort of get it. Okay,
hmm
you go and see a play, whatever it might be, right?
hmm hmm
But the opera, I mean, I think today, how many people are fans of opera? A lot of people love opera, but
Yeah.
it's a love-hate. Like, you either
Oh
love it
yeah.
or you hate it. You're not just like, oh yeah, I could listen to it on and off. It's meh.
No, you're right.
Most
Absolutely.
people, and I'm thinking, okay, because Calgary had a huge opera house too.
Hmm
We had two of them actually.
hmm
And I'm thinking, did the cowboys riding the range in the Wild West, shooting buffalo and fighting off the wild Indians, were
hmm
they big fans of opera? Like, on one hand, we're told it's the Wild West and it was out of control and everybody was scalping everybody. But
Yeah.
then on the other hand, they were sophisticated enough to enjoy an Italian
Yeah.
opera
Yeah.
here in
Yeah.
Calgary or up in Edmonton or there in Winnipeg.
No, it doesn't make sense, does it? This is, yeah. So this Orpheum, is that supposed to be the same place? I have it. Oh, this is the Walker Theater. Walker Theater interior. I thought it might be the same.
Like, there's still an old vaudeville theater here in Calgary that I'm gonna hit
Yeah.
up in the summertime.
You can go
Over in
check out live shows.
yeah, they still have live performances there, but it's more sort of a small music venue,
Mm-hmm.
singer songwriter, acoustic guitar kind of. But it used to be a vaudeville theater where they had all the the old vaudeville acts, the joke tellers, the jugglers, the blackface uh, performances,
Mm-hmm.
all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that, as a variety entertainment show, I'm much more open to than opera.
Mm-hmm.
For some
Mm-hmm.
reason, and maybe it's just, again, my personal indoctrination that we're taught that opera is a European thing. And why
Mm-hmm.
would cowboys love opera? I don't know. It just seems so out of place, especially here in the West, Canada
Well,
and the US. Same
yeah.
thing, like in Oklahoma City, the cowboys there loved opera, apparently.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Well, opera, that could be part of the inheritors narrative, right? Turning these into opera
That's what
using.
I think. Yeah,
Yeah.
because who the hell in, like, Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1852
Yeah.
or in Edmonton, Alberta in, 1893, who was like scrambling to go to the opera house to hear
Mhm.
like opera being sung, like, it's Italian mostly.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I hear you.
The Italian's not a big language in Canada.
No, I know that. Yeah, so we have old opera house and maybe a new one. This is weird. This doesn't make sense up here compared to what we're seeing down here.
Yeah, they built that onto
Okay.
the top, I think, or something.
Yeah, and this is a rendering where it's apparently 1926. That was the end of it. Yeah.
That must have been a beauty.
Right? Yeah, like they're spectacular. There's even some of the theaters I look into, like San Francisco Fox Theater. If you ever look into that, it'll blow your mind. It'll absolutely blow your mind. St. Louis has a Fox Theater, and they're just unbelievable structures.
Well, speaking of that, when you mentioned the Orpheum Theater here in Winnipeg, it
Yeah,
seems like that name Orpheum is also very common. A lot of cities had an Orpheum
yeah.
theater.
They had an Orpheum. They had a Lyceum a lot of the time. Sometimes a Pantages or Pantage. I don't know how to pronounce it. They pop up. Like I said, these things pop up over and over as you look from city to city.
Right.
Orpheum again. Vancouver's got a legendary Orpheum theater.
Yes. Yeah.
I've been in there. Yeah.
Toronto does too, or
Mm-hmm.
had.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember. I'm sure Calgary, one of them was called Orpheum too. I mean, we had the Palace, we had the Showcase Grand, we had the Grand, we had the Auburn Saloon, which is still called the Auburn Saloon. That's that vaudeville place.
Okay. Yeah.
We had the Fort Garry Theater. No, the Gary Theater.
Uh-huh.
For spelled Gary with two R's, for
Yeah. Yeah.
Calgary with one R,
GAR.
which is
Interesting.
weird.
All right. I'm at the end of the line with my pictures here. So.
Oh, Winnipeg Beach. That's pretty famous.
Yeah.
That's still around, Winnipeg Beach. That's a big thing.
This big pavilion still kicking?
I don't know if that's still there, but
Yeah.
Winnipeg Beach is still a big. I mean, it's right in Winnipeg, and it's right on Lake Winnipeg or Lake Manitoba, whatever bloody lake the city is beside. But yeah, that's famous. Because you think again, a beach in Winnipeg, but yeah, like in the summers it gets hot there, and there's a sandy beach there.
Well, I got to tell you, I did not think I was going to find 150 photographs on Old World Winnipeg. Usually, like the big cities, like the Bostons and the Montreals and all that kind of stuff, I get up to 150, no problem.
Yeah.
But a city like Winnipeg, I was thinking maybe 60 or 70 Old World pictures, and that would be a good amount. But no, Winnipeg had so much more to offer than I expected. It's pretty amazing.
That's why I'm so shocked that when I was trying to find odd and strange old stories of Winnipeg, like unusual places and things that have to do with Winnipeg, I was surprised that I didn't come across much, because I knew that there were so many of these beautiful old buildings. I've personally been to Winnipeg enough that I've seen some of them, and I remember seeing them. I mean, it's been years. It's been well over a decade since the last time I was in Winnipeg, but it's one of those Canadian cities that for some reason it's given a bad rap. Other Canadians never want to travel as a tourist to Winnipeg. Like even now, like if I don't know, if I went and knocked on my neighbor's door and said, "Hey neighbor, I'm heading to Winnipeg for a vacation. You need me to bring you back anything?" They'd be like, "What are you going to Winnipeg for? You got family out there? Like, what the hell are you going to Winnipeg of all places?" Right? Same as Edmonton.
I was going to just say Edmonton's got a very similar reputation.
Yeah, it's known as Deadmonton, and but I lived in Edmonton 3 years, and there's, like any other city, there's boring, crappy, ugly parts of Edmonton that are dangerous and just shitty. But it's still overall a beautiful city, especially in the old city and in the river valley. And Winnipeg's no different. The historic areas of Winnipeg, absolutely beautiful. The association with both national railroads, there's lots of old railroad related buildings out there that still stand. It's amazing.
Well, I think a part of the inheritors narrative is they want us to get down about where we are and who we are. They want us to be negative about it and not think too much of it, right? So you can just shrug it off and I live in Winnipeg. It sucks here. They want that attitude out of us, right? And what I encourage people to do is say, embrace where you are and then explore where you are. If you get into this research, it's like every day is a new day. It's like you're a kid in the candy store. If you
That's why I didn't accept the narrative of Calgary after a while. It's a new city, and it just kind of sprang up out of the prairies from the Mounties, building a fort here.
You're like, wait a tick.
To protect the fur trade. And then I'm thinking to myself, wait a second, I live in a neighborhood where there's 3-story old world brick buildings that have limestone carved medallions and fancy sort of sawtooth or dog tooth roof lines along the soffits, and I'm just like, it doesn't fit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're told it was, you know, wild cowboys and whiskey runners out here, and it was like I said, the narrative for Calgary is like a Clint Eastwood movie, the Wild West.
Mm-hmm.
You know, with a
Mm-hmm.
tumbleweed blowing down the road and the wooden sidewalks and shoot
Yeah.
'em ups at high noon, and you know, and all, and you know, and the sheriff and all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But then I'm walking around my own city, and I'm like, wait a second. It says right on that building that it was built in, you know, 1898. Supposedly that was just nothing but dust and cowboys out here, but that's like a 5-story red brick building covered in glazed terracotta tiles, and it's got gargoyles all over it. You
Yeah.
know, and it looks way older than even when they're said it was built. And they're said it was built during the cowboy days. So it's like a double BS
Well,
piled onto it.
you bring the Hollywood into the conversation again too, and it's like Hollywood. If you watch movies now with eyes, old world eyes,
Mm-hmm.
you see it everywhere. Old world
Yes,
building. Oh, they're shooting at an old world building. Look at that old world building. They throw it in our faces, and then they tell us it's not a thing. It's not real, right? So
absolutely.
it's a part of their magician, their Holly wand or whatever they use to obscure our vision, right? But they throw it in our faces all the time. So once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you go into this stuff, you can't go back. You really can't put the genie back in the bottle, I
That's
think.
right. And see, I'm very lucky because I was very close with my grandfather, but I was also very close with his dad, my great grandfather. I mean, I was 6 when he died.
Oh yeah,
So
wow.
he died in 1976, and he was born in like
Oh,
1882 or something like that.
you're
So I
lucky.
remember as a kid just hanging out with the old timers
Mm-hmm.
because I wanted to hang around my dad, and my dad was hanging around his dad. And, you
Mm-hmm.
know, it was just, I got used to hearing them talking about old time stuff. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I can remember as a kid, my grandfather telling me, oh, when I was your age, there weren't airplanes, there weren't cars. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought he was crazy. Well, how'd you get around, Grandpa? And he said, well, a horse and buggy, you know, or just ride the horse into town. Or if you had to get supplies, you attach the wagon onto the back of the horse and you
Mm-hmm.
pull it into town. And by today, Grandpa could drive into town in 10 minutes, but back then it took me 2 hours, you know, and I'm
Yeah.
like, wow, you
Yeah.
know. And you know, they all worked at some point or another in the off season. They were farmers, but in the off season they worked for the railroad. My great
Yeah.
granddaddy, my granddaddy, a couple of my great uncles, a couple of my uncles, they all worked for CP because, you know, they're all in and out of the Montreal area, like
Yeah.
rural areas and small towns in and around Montreal.
Yeah.
So I mean, railroad was just easy, steady work.
Yeah,
So
we take it for granted geography and communication. People ask, well, if this was true, that we would have known about it years ago. It's like we weren't able to communicate like we are now, and we didn't have the means to move like we do now, to travel. So you had to be content with whatever that newspaper was telling you and whatever the schoolhouse was telling you. You didn't have an internet to go to. You didn't have Frankie from Calgary to have a chat with about this stuff. We would be sending letters back and forth, and it would be this conversation that we've had today would have taken a year or two to converse.
all
Like
right,
back and
sending
forth.
letters back and forth and photographs back and forth. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So it's
You
everything's
know,
speeding up in that way, right? Mm-hmm.
so I wish that I had. I don't know. The one thing that I know for a little while, my grandfather worked for a brick company in Montreal, and not right in the city of Montreal, but again, you know, just outside of Montreal.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish I knew then what I know now. So, and I wish he was still around. He passed about 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That I could pick his brain about the brick industry and just how many bricks and how labor intensive it is to make enough bricks to even just build a 2-story modest house, like 1,000 square foot, you know, 4-bedroom farmhouse out of brick, or even just the main floor out of brick and the second floor out of wood.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like a lot of them were actually. You know, you'd build your house out of brick, and as your family expanded, you'd knock the roof off and you'd build a second floor,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, wood frame second floor, but the main floor of the house, the walls were brick.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah, yeah.
unfortunately, you know, because that firsthand knowledge of how bricks were made, how they were shipped around.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously the railroad had a track that went right into the brick yards, and they would load the rail cars with pallets of brick,
Mm-hmm.
and it would be shipped out from there. But pre-railroad,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the pallets of bricks were loaded onto carts pulled by mules and by horses.
Mm-hmm. Mhm.
So now you're tripling your travel time, and the loads are a lot smaller.
Mhm. Yeah, it's
It would have just really been interesting to pick his brain about all these questions.
mhm. Mhm. Well, I think we're at the point now in this research that it's not a matter of are, are we being lied to? We know that there's a deception going on here. I guess sometimes I ask myself, no, where do we go from here with all this research? What are we getting to the bottom of, right?
Yeah, what do
But
we do with it?
yeah, but I think it's the more eyes on it, the more we can uncover and get closer um, to something that we can say, yeah, this is more like what happened, not what they're telling us. And I don't know if that, for me, that's kind of the goal, is like, let's move closer to some conclusions on what was actually here, you
That's
know.
why I agree with what you said too about exploring your own area, because that's the best way to get to the bottom of it,
Hmm.
is just to go out and have a look at things with your own two eyes. And like you said earlier too, once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Hmm.
Once I started noticing these buildings and saying, wait a second, it's built in 1892 here, but they're saying there's really nothing here in 18,
Hmm.
like it should have just been wood frame houses and
Hmm.
sod houses, right? You know what sod houses are?
Yeah, yeah, I've seen those in the
Yeah, I
prairies
mean
and
that's the narrative for around here, because it was so flat and hardly any trees until you
hmm.
get a slightly closer to the mountains.
Hmm.
There's some trees along the river here, but you know not enough to sustain a boom towning and building everything out of wood. So then I'm seeing all this brick and
Yeah,
sandstone buildings, and they look like they belong in Europe from the 1700s. And I'm like, this whole cowboy narrative thing,
yeah,
something ain't right. I mean, I live in a neighborhood that just doesn't even fit in that narrative, and it's one of the oldest neighborhoods in Calgary. It was
yeah,
developed
yeah.
in 1903 where I live. There's only
And
two
then
neighborhoods older than this here.
we can't really hang our hats on anything historically. Like, people will use the argument, well, what about the first peoples that lived here? And we have to understand, all of our history has been obscured, especially theirs. But like when they try to reach into Aboriginal people in the history of the on the continent, their history was scrubbed just as ours was. All of our
Oh,
histories has
they
been
were
scrubbed.
they were. I mean, there was an out and out attempt at full genocide. Um,
Absolutely,
and
absolutely.
the closest they got was, rounding them off and shipping them, unfortunately, to these crappy tracts of land that they called,
Reserves.
Indian reserves,
Yeah,
where you can't grow anything because the soil is all
yeah,
acidic from all the pine needles and stuff, because it's not in the grasslands, and
yeah,
so on and so forth. But
yeah.
the greatest gift that our indigenous peoples gave the controllers was the fact that they had an oral history, from
Hmm.
what we're told, right? Not
Yeah,
much of a written history in terms of Canadian Indigenous First Nations.
sure. Yeah,
So, therefore, if everything is passed down through spoken word and through song lyrics,
yeah,
if nothing's recorded physically on, in written language per se,
yeah.
it's real easy for the controllers to, like you said, to just completely muddle and destroy their a narrative, and then just construct a new narrative for them too.
Well, then that gets into the world's fairs and what they were presenting there for what existed here on the continent. And you know, if you look a little bit deeper into that, it's pretty ugly. The human zoos and the world's fairs, and
Yeah.
they were
Oh, yeah.
painting a picture. They were trying to paint a picture for the reset people, I suppose you could say.
That's right. Here's what little island people looked like,
Yeah.
with their loincloths and their spears. And here's what African tribes people look like. And here's what North American Indians look like with their feathers and bows and arrows. And,
Hmm.
and here's what Polynesians looked like. And yeah, so you would
Hmm.
just go from pavilion to pavilion in these world fairs and
Yeah.
go, oh, that's what Germans do every day. Oh,
Yeah.
that's what the Philippines is. Oh, that's what Eskimos are.
That's right. Stereotypes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's my message too. Is like, we were all much, much more than we are now. Something has been taken from us. We've fallen, right? And there's a biblical aspect to that. The fallen, we fell from what we once were, a much higher state of existence here, and that goes for all human beings on in this realm.
I
I
think
almost said on.
some of the truth does slip into the phony narrative, though, because there is
Is
a
it?
narrative about the native Indigenous First Nations here in Canada, that, you know, they were a stoic, a proud, majestic
Mm-hmm.
race that lived in harmony with nature. But
Mm-hmm.
then we're also told they were warring tribes that slaughtered each other and took prisoners, and they were wild savages.
Mm-hmm.
But I think some of that stoic, majestic narrative does lend a little bit to the actual truth of the actual past of our Indigenous.
Yeah,
I think that a lot of these old world structures that we see now that we're told were 1800s are much older. And I
mm-hmm.
think that part of the lost narrative overall of Canada is that some of the earliest of what we now call our First Nations probably inhabited some of these older buildings, and then the controllers came along and everybody was moved around, orphan trains, Indian
Yeah.
reserves,
Yeah.
immigration populations coming in, moving populations around, using quote unquote Chinese to build railroads, all this stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then everything gets jumbled around and mixed around, so that eventually the First Nations forget their own true
Of
narrative,
course.
and they go by what their great granddaddy told them was, yeah, we used to follow the buffalo herds around and live in teepees. You know, that's what it was.
Yeah. Well,
You
they've
know,
scrubbed the memory, right? They've scrubbed
yeah,
their memory,
the
and they've
cultural
planted a false
genocide.
memory. That's
Yeah,
right. Yeah, and a similar storyline with the African American in the States. Michelle Gibson gets into this too, where she's suggesting the Moorish civilization um, was here, right? Moorish people, not African American, but Moorish American. I've heard that term used as well. So these people were here on this continent as a part of the old world civilization.
yeah,
All
I've heard that before too, in sort of certain areas of the sort of southeast, and like in around Florida,
sure,
Georgia,
Louisiana.
the Louisiana, the Carolinas, that sort of area. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and it and
and made and conducted trade with the early Central and Southern American indigenous peoples. What we've
mhm,
come to be taught is the Aztecs, the
yeah,
Incas, the what was the other one? The Aztecs, the Mayans.
Mayans. Yeah,
Mayans, yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's all very interesting stuff, and then once you de-solidify the narrative, you can really explore these things, right?
But the
It's
other
pretty
thing to
interesting.
remember too is that at one time, the entire Midwest of the United States, coming all the way up into southern Alberta here, was all part of the Louisiana territories, was
Mm.
owned by Spain.
Yeah, yeah.
So, like, were there Spanish people living all the way up through to what is now, the Great Plains and the Midwest of the United States, like,
Mhm.
in Kansas and in the Dakotas. And like, did they speak Spanish? Like, even in the early 1800s in the cities, like, were the
Mhm.
menus, like I saw John Levi where he found menus from
Yeah.
some old world city right around the mid 1800s, and a lot of the menus were in French and
Mhm.
Spanish, and these were in
Mhm.
American cities, like developed, built out modern American cities. Well,
Mhm.
modern for that time, 1800s. So I'm
Yeah.
thinking, like, really, we speaking multiple languages here in the quote unquote new world, quite early on as
Well,
well. Like, was there
yeah.
Moorish tongues being spoken and early forms of Spanish,
Well, yeah.
early French, and, like, who knows, right?
Well, yeah, where the homogenization of the language, where the English language is now taken over, and again, back to the Aboriginal people and the Irish and many cultures, their languages are taken away from them. Um, because I think all language holds keys to the past as well. It's almost like the biblical story of the Tower of Babel,
Yeah,
where we were divided. We were once
confuse the
united.
languages.
When we
Yeah,
say we were once united, it doesn't mean we were all homogenous. It
no,
means that we were interworking. We're all these different people were together and able to coexist.
that's
And
right.
then there
Yeah,
was
it's
dividing.
not necessary. I don't want to say that we're promoting, like, because people say, oh, that kind of thing is, what you want to. If we go back to that, it's like what the New World Order wants. And no,
Exactly.
we're
No,
not
no,
saying one world government, one world
no.
currency. No, 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 no.
We're
We're
not looking
saying
for
that
homogenization.
these were still independent nations and regions of the realm. They just coexisted and worked together. They were trading partners. They were exchanged art and ideas, and it was part of a sort of a global village made up of different cultures that worked in unison with one another.
Yeah.
But there were still some distinctions between certain areas of the realm.
Oh, absolutely.
In terms of their culture and the way they dressed and languages and all of that sort of thing. Absolutely.
The culture is what's being eliminated with the whole globalization
That's right.
process, which is what we're trying to get back to, trying to retain our culture. We're trying to dig a little deeper into the roots of it to get it back, I think. Yeah.
That's why a lot of people say, it's a shame we just don't build the way we used to build these old buildings. And it's not so much now too, because all about the almighty dollar, and it's cost prohibitive to be all decorative and beautiful. I mean, that's part of it. But the other part of it is just, again, the culture denigration, right? Just destroying the culture. If just our basic buildings that we use for services and dwellings are unappealing, it doesn't lend itself to a culturally driven, art driven society that can appreciate aesthetic beauty and function like working in unison. Like these buildings may have had a function, but they're also beautiful. They don't just look like crappy factories today. And because art has been destroyed with the modern art movement, where that's guys like Van Gogh and Jackson Pollock. Okay, I can admire their work, but that's held in just as high esteem as the Renaissance artists, or whatever you want to call them, that narrative. It's like, no, that stuff was much more beautiful, and the buildings of the old world were much more beautiful because it was form and function working together for a higher purpose.
Yeah. So like lost technology repurposed, right? And we went to the and all the petrochemical and all that kind of stuff. So there's definitely a hijacking that's gone on, and a covering up of old technologies that we haven't had in use for 100 some years, 200 years, who knows what it is. We're trying to figure that out, I think.
Right. Yeah. But also not just that too, but re-prescribing our idea of what beauty is, and some people look at the modern glass skyscrapers and think, oh, these are beautiful. They're so amazing. Not really. I mean, it all boils down to it. It's a rectangle standing up on one end, kind of, sort of, for the most part.
The brutalists, right?
Yeah, and again, it's that brutalist. Yes, exactly. Where the ugly is touted as being beautiful, and the actual beautiful is touted as being old-fashioned or out of favor.
Yeah, I ran into that doing a lot of renovation work where people wanted flat stock and single colored shades of gray, that type of thing, and rather than ornate decoration and things that catch your eye.
Right, because that's the old style. That's I don't want you doing my grandma's house. You're doing my house here, buddy, and I want it to be modern and sleek. And, yeah.
It's all a part of the ruse, that they put on. It's part of the trick to move us further away from what we once were, I think.
Yeah, it's part of our dehumanizing us, making us less human, not only physically with all of this, trying to marry technology with us as organic creatures. We'll get these implants in your brain. It'll help you, or what? No, thank you. Not only that, but, just all the other aspects of what they're plugging into our minds on a subconscious level in terms of weird ideas, finding the ugly beautiful, and finding the beautiful to be out of sync or something,
That's right.
Really, the opposite should be true.
Well, they're inverting everything. They invert everything, right?
Yeah.
That's what they say.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, that's, again, as always, really, really great to chat with you, buddy. I always have a great time meeting with you, my friend. This is
me too.
Always a blast. And like you said, kind of more down to earth, kind of having fun with it. We don't have to be all hoity-toity and use all this fancy terminology necessary. Just, a couple of fellas just checking out some photos and exploring and trying to educate ourselves and educate anybody who wants to come along in the journey with us. And I think that's a great way to do it.
Right on.
And
Been a pleasure.
I couldn't pick a better partner, man. Just nice and laid back, easy going, and coming to the table with lots of great stuff as usual.
Just a couple knuckleheads. That's all.
That's right. Just a couple of knuckleheads doing our thing.
All right. Take care, my friend.
All right, all have yourselves a good one, and have fun with the family for your time off.
Yeah.
All right, we'll talk to you later, sir. Take care,
Bye.
okay?